It might actually be the most derivative one of all. I mean, Christ, the same house.
Maybe so. But you forgot the first rule of surviving a stab movie. Never answer the...
I'm bored.
Wait!
And welcome back to Horror Queers. We're talking Jimmy Choo stilettos. We're talking maggot vomit. And we're talking Allison fucking Williams and Logan fucking Browning. And I'm Joe.
And I'm Trace, and we're talking the wig reveal to end all wig reveals.
Oh my god, if only she had rose petals under it.
Everyone, we are discussing Richard Shepard's The Perfection again today, and we will tell you why we are doing that. But no, your feed is not broken. This is not a reposted episode. This is new, brand new.
It's true. Yeah, it's 2023. We are saving a Scream film. So you'll hear our episode on Scream a little bit later in the year. So we thought instead we might do a redo because it seems appropriate. We'll explain why in a minute.
Yeah, so but before we do, why don't we bring on our guest? So, everyone, she is a trans, queer, multi-instrumentalist from Chicago who has been releasing music for over a decade, balancing elements from many diverse genres while maintaining the goal of merging beauty with loudness. She is also the editor of our sister podcast, Halloweenies. Please welcome Mae Shults.
Ooh.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. This is Mae. I hope your cunt can handle it, Schultz. So glad I got to use that one.
How did I can't believe I didn't pick that.
I know. I was so worried you were going to, because I was like, oh, that's Trace's favorite word.
Oh, that's my legacy, is it? I just love the word cunt, right?
That's one of your legacies. Yeah, we'll let the listeners decide on the others.
It's part of your charm.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you came in with that banger, Mae. How are you doing?
I'm good. I have a new album that's almost done. Hopefully by the time this airs, it'll be up for pre-order. I don't know. There's going to be amazing shirts with it. And I'm really, really excited. It's the story of Medusa as a trans woman.
Ooh.
Yeah, Medusa got done dirty by the gods of Mount Olympus. And, that story's pretty relatable to me in a lot of ways. So it seemed appropriate.
That sounds awesome. Also, Medusa's one of my favorite Gorgons, so...
Oh, absolutely.
So as we kind of hinted at, we are doing a redo. Joe, can you help me out with this? Why are we, for the first time in the history of this podcast, redoing an episode?
Well, sort of. We should acknowledge that obviously we have covered Scream and Scream 2 in two different iterations, but those are both Patreon audio commentaries. So yes, this is the first time we've ever done a redo on the main feed, and folks will remember that we have covered The Perfection back when it first came out on Netflix in May of 2019. And Trace, we used to do things a little bit different, but also the Patreon episodes are typically a little bit shorter. So when we saw that film, we were very excited. And I think you can hear it if you go back and listen to that episode. Like, it's a big gush fest about the movie and how it looks and, the different parts and the twists and how surprised we were. And we got feedback from it. We got at least one review, like actual Apple Podcast review that said, really disappointed in the way that you guys handled this episode. You didn't treat the sexual assault like you didn't properly look into it. You were kind of glib, a little bit facile, like you kind of passed and breezed over it. So when we were coming up with the 2023 schedule, we originally conceived of spending the entire month of January doing nothing but redo episodes that needed like a second try. And instead we were like, oh, there's too much content. Like we'll just do 1 week. But we specifically pinpointed this one because we not only still really love this movie, but also we wanted to do right by that person who said, you know what, you guys should be doing better.
Yeah.
Was the title of their review? I'd avoid the word gush fest.
I honestly, because looking back, I intentionally did not go back and listen to that episode because I didn't want to just have it on my mind and be like, oh my God, I can't do that, I can't do that, I can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it maybe have been a part of me just being like, oh my God, this movie is so much fun. It's wild, It's bonkers, it's so fun, and it's a secret rape revenge movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I'm not going to deny the fact that we probably didn't do it as well. Like that would have been back in the first year of the pod.
Yeah.
Patreon episodes, as I said, are typically shorter. They're a little bit more fast paced. Like I think we recorded that the day The Perfection dropped on Netflix so we could get it out as soon as possible. So we didn't even have the advantage of being able to draw on our contemporaries or our colleagues, because I think in successive entries, particularly for Rape Revenge, so content warning everybody, if you're seeing The Perfection for the first time, it is, as Trace said, a secret rape revenge film. But, you know, when we covered things like Promising Young Woman and even The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, we really tried to draw on female critics, diverse critics, just to give us a greater sense of like, okay, how are other people negotiating and working with this film?
Yep. And look, I still do think this is a very fun film that deals with some very fucked up subject matter. It's not exactly in the same ballpark as something like, say, Freeway or Perdita Durango, but
no.
I'm wondering if it's maybe that kind of thing where it's like, oh, like I am having fun with this, and I do think a lot of it is quite funny while also being very upsetting.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of its strengths. And one of the things that's great about genre films is if this were a straight up drama and it tried to tackle things and still throw in the bits of humor that it has, it would fall flat on its face. It would be upsetting and offensive, honestly. But because it's a genre film, because it is technically a horror film, I think that gives it more strength.
Well, and I think time is a really important thing to take into account here, because when this originally came out in 2019, the Harvey Weinstein stuff hadn't blown over, but like it had like come out in full force, so everyone knew about it. And so now that we've had 3 years, oh my God, distance. And I'm not saying that the water has cooled a little bit. Obviously, sexual assault is still terrible, and you should not do that to anyone ever. But I do think
good PSA, Trace. Good job. Good job.
I do think that tensions were high at the time, especially whenever a film that was primarily focused on sexual assault was coming out, especially a horror film.
Yeah, let me add to that. I don't even know that it was just tension, but it seemed like we wanted to filter our critical lens of every film through that particular read, right? So like when you go back and read reviews for this film, everybody mentions Me Too, and a bunch of people mention the USA gymnastics coach who apparently was abusing women for many, many years in the same way that Anton does in this film. And the reality is that both of those scandals actually broke after this film was either into pre-production or was into post-production. So this film isn't a commentary on those issues, but because they were in the cultural zeitgeist, everybody wanted to connect this film to those particular scandals.
Yeah, I was seeing a lot of like, oh, this film's very irresponsible given today's climate. And it's like, oh, but like, it wasn't the climate when they were making it.
Right. There's a lot of prescience that films sometimes have that seems almost like a premonition.
Yeah, it's like they're fortune readers, right?
Right, exactly. They don't know it's going to have the impact and the cultural resonance that it does when they're making it. And you look at something like Scream 4, which to me, and I think y'all talked about this on the episode, that it feels more prescient now than it did when it originally came out because of the way social media has gone.
Yeah. That movie is wild for what it managed to predict. And the fact that we get to retcon like, oh no, wow, it really is prescient. And you're like, yeah, we just didn't feel that at the time. I feel like with rape revenge films, there's always going to be a certain level of heightened sensitivity. And I think justifiably so. Like, especially for women and men who have been victims.
Survivors.
Yep. And thank you. I think for anybody who has been a survivor of sexual assault or sexual harassment, even, you wear that, right? Like, you got that trauma sort of ingrained in you, and it can be really, really challenging to watch these movies. It's actually one of the reasons why we were so lucky to have you on this particular episode, Mae, is because Trace and I realize we're never going to be able to do certain aspects justice, right? So it's important to have a female perspective on this because Trace and I have a different experience of moving through the world.
Right. And I'll say right off the bat, I am a survivor of multiple assaults and a couple abusive relationships. So these characters are very relatable to me, as are many characters in a lot of films like this. You know, the part where Lisbeth gets her revenge in Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, I cried my eyes out because of how cathartic it felt. And it was a really powerful moment. And this movie does sort of the same thing for me.
I'm interested to talk about that. I mean, we don't have to do it right yet. Maybe we wait till we get in the plot a bit. But like, yeah, there's so much going on in this movie in 85-minute runtime.
Right.
That's the most hilarious thing. Like, my initial run at the plot for this movie was 5 pages long. And usually that's what I get for about a 2 to a 2.5 hour film. And I was just like, it's because this movie is loaded with things to talk about. Like, there's so many significant looks, glances, shots, like,
and it's so well
editing.
paced too.
Very well paced. Yes,
it never feels like there's too much happening, and it never feels as short or as brief as it actually is.
Well, and I will say that if you want a longer, and I'll use in quotes, classier version of this movie, you can actually go watch Park Chan-wook's The Handmaiden? Yeah. You can go watch Park Chan-wook's The Handmaiden, which we have also covered on this podcast, and which our guest at the time, Jenny Nolf, very much made us aware that this movie took a lot of inspirations from The Handmaiden.
Oh, for sure. And The Handmaiden is absolutely fantastic.
But a little different, but yeah, I mean, like, it's still
for
like,
sure.
Twisty, turny, like women teaming up and getting revenge, blah, 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 blah.
And of course, Shepard and the 2 writers on this film, you know, we had the pleasure of talking to writer Eric Carmelo. So he very much clarified, yeah, like, everybody is on record. This movie is explicitly indebted to Korean films that have this kind of narrative structure. So I'm going to try not to be overly critical of some of the reviews that I don't entirely agree with, but I did find it very surprising that so many people were just like, and they're using all these twists and turns as a way of like shocking us, and they're not giving reverence to like the seriousness of the subject matter. And I was like,
okay.
What?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Also,
But that's where it's like, okay, but this film dips its toes into exploitation.
Yes.
And I think that, so it always makes me laugh when I see reviews saying, oh, this movie has a responsibility to do this, to do this, to do this. And I'm like, hey, it's a genre movie. But also, this movie specifically is a horror film. And I'm not saying, like, you can't have those critiques or whatever, but I just find it a little funny when a movie that is like this is critiqued for, quote unquote, not being responsible.
Yeah, it's a complicated thing to talk about social responsibility in terms of art. I think artists themselves, because they are people, have social responsibility when they interact directly in the public eye. You know, people on Twitter spouting their opinions and saying really horrible things about large swaths of people. Not cool. Making a movie, a work of fiction that does something, it's not about being responsible all the time. I think there are certain things that if you put them in a film and you put that film out there, or a song, whatever, any kind of art does have an impact. It can have an impact. And I know that something y'all talk about a lot is not the separation of art from artists, but the separation of artist's intent from audience reception. And I think that is so key in a discussion like this, because the movie does not have a responsibility. The movie is there to be entertaining, and maybe it has a little bit of a message, maybe it doesn't. But people putting the onus on the film itself does not seem appropriate to me.
And that's kind of what I was trying to get at when I was saying, like, at the time in 2019, like, tensions were high around sexual assault. And so, and, I mean, look, we saw it earlier this year too, and I'll put it on a queer stance instead of a sexual assault one, but like with They/Them, which by most accounts is not a very good movie, but we also had a lot of queer people that were attacking it for like not being the right type of queer, right?
Yeah, I think we get into a dangerous situation when we want the movie to give us the things that we want, as opposed to acknowledging that the movie isn't always going to do that, but that doesn't make the movie bad. It maybe just means that you have criticisms of the film. And I think that you can you can acknowledge, okay, the perfection is doing one thing and I don't like it, as opposed to saying, well, this is either an irresponsible film or the film should be doing other things. Like, that's where I think the dialogue becomes so important, as opposed to saying, oh, well, I don't like this movie because it's bad. It's like, well, or is it just that it wasn't working for you, and why, and have those conversations.
Right, and that's fine. Not every movie works for everybody. And
so true.
If you don't like something, yeah, that sucks. You've invested time into it. You were excited about it. You wanted to like it. And again, putting the onus on the movie itself is so weird to me. It's just like, okay, I didn't like this. I grew up watching Mystery Science Theater. I still constantly watch Mystery Science Theater and Riff Tracks. I watch bad movies with love.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoy them. But sometimes a movie comes along and I'm like, oh, I am really mad I wasted my time on that.
Oh, no.
Okay, well, here, so we'll start talking about the movie, but really, I have a little bit of production for us. So yeah, this movie was announced in September of 2017, and the Weinstein case, the first accusations broke out publicly in October of 2017, the next month. But the funny thing is, in that September announcement for this movie, it was because Miramax was announced to be producing and financing the film.
Yeah, it is deeply ironic, and I think, unfortunately, gives some of this movie's critics, like the people who don't like it, I think it gives them a little bit of ammunition to be like, oh my God, and like your own studio.
Yeah, a little bit. And so it was announced at the time Richard Shepard would be directing, and of course the script was co-written by himself, Eric Carmello, and Nicole Snyder. And a little bit about Shepard. So I had never really heard of him before I saw this movie. He's made a name for himself directing mostly TV gigs, but he has had 2 feature film efforts, both of which are Black comedies. I think they're both R-rated too. But it's 2005's The Matador, starring Pierce Brosnan and Greg Kinnear.
So good.
Okay, good. I'm glad that someone has seen this, because I don't.
Oh, I saw it in the theater with my mom, and we loved it.
Well, showing how like hubristic I am, I was like, well, I've never heard of this, so it must not be good. And then I go and it's like 75% of Rotten Tomatoes. I was
eating crow once again.
Again, don't be that person. Don't be me, everyone. But the other one was 2013's Dom Hemingway, which starred Jude Law. And both of these are Black comedies about like gangsters, assassins, and the mafia. So I looked at some of like the review blurbs for all of them. And again, the reviews are mostly positive, but the negative ones are like, yeah, it's abrasive. It's too dark. Oh, the tonal thing doesn't work. It was not too dissimilar from critiques I've seen of this movie. The funny thing is, though, his TV work is noticeably lighter. So if y'all listen to our interview with Eric Carmello, you'll know that this crew also created the TV show Ringer, the Sarah Michelle Gellar show that was a one-hit wonder on the CW about
Big Red forever.
That show was so fucking fun. I loved it.
I still haven't watched it. I'm a terrible Buffy fan.
May, so here's the thing.
It's terrible initially.
Yeah, it has a really bad first third of the season where it's just like really like boring. And then about a third of the way through, it realized that it needs to be soapy trash, and it goes for it. And
oh my God, then it just becomes so watchable because it's absolutely ludicrous, but it's a show that knows that it is.
See, that's why I like Riverdale.
Yeah, okay.
But like, this is more fun than Riverdale because it's not aggravating.
Yes.
Fair, yes.
But I will say that Carmelo did tell us that the reason there were issues is because the director, or I guess the whoever the head of the CW was at the time, didn't get that show and was trying to make it something it wasn't. And then they fired that fucker and got someone in who knew what the show was trying to do. But besides that, he also directed the pilots for such shows as Ugly Betty and Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist. And he directed 12 episodes of HBO's Girls, which is probably how he nabbed Allison Williams for this movie.
Yeah, and I think it also, it gives me a good sense of that lightness and darkness, but also, like, those are very queer-friendly shows in my mind. So I think that kind of lends itself to some of the sort of fun treatment of the sex in this movie.
Yeah, and I don't know if Shepard himself is gay, but everyone, Eric Carmello is a gay man. So, you know, we've got that at least going into this movie as well.
Richard Shepard is not. He has a wife.
He might still be queer, though.
Yeah,
that is true. Yep.
That's true.
We can hope.
But yeah, so the film had its world premiere at Fantastic Fest on September 20th, 2018. That is where I saw it, and then heard no news about it and was really mad because I loved this movie when I saw it at a festival. And I'm going to tell you right now, as much as I appreciate the Netflix model for some things, this is a movie that plays gangbusters in a crowded theater.
Oh, I would kill to see this in a theater. I feel like it would be amazing. I've seen so many good horror movies this year in the theater.
Mm-hmm. With a full audience, or
yeah, like seeing the menu with a full audience.
Oh yeah,
I don't remember if y'all have talked about Smile yet, but Erica and I really liked it, and we had so much fun seeing it in the theater because everyone was having the same reactions, and it just makes it so much more enriching of an experience. And this movie, I cannot even imagine like the collective gasps that would have come up. I feel like that would be so fun.
Well, the funny thing is with this one, so like, normally for film festivals, they have the schedule, they have the list of films out, about a month in advance of the festival itself. This movie was added to the Fantastic Fest docket the day before the festival started. And so no one knew what it was. It was going up against In Fabric. So like that was the big film. So everyone went to go see In Fabric, but I
still haven't seen that.
It's good.
That's good.
What's the director's name, Joe?
Peter Strickland?
Yes. So I at the time, I did not know who Peter Strickland was. So I was like, okay, y'all are going to go see this killer.
Oh, I've never heard of this guy. He must suck.
No, everyone was so, I basically, well, because everyone was so wild for Barbarian Sound Studio. So they're like, oh my God, we have to go see this guy's next movie. Well, I
don't like that movie.
My husband hates it, and I've never seen it.
Okay, look, I came to that because one of my favorite bands, Broadcast, did the score for it. And I really like, what's his name? Toby Jones. Toby Jones. I love Toby Jones. He's fantastic. And I was like, ooh, Giallo inspired, score by one of my favorite bands. And then I watched it and I was just like so let down by it. And as someone who has done a lot of sound design and some Foley work, that part of it was really cool, but it didn't do what I wanted it to do at all.
Mm-hmm. It wasn't a film for you.
No, exactly. And that's totally fine. I'll just stick with listening to the score and be sad that Trish from Broadcast died.
Oh.
There you go. Well, nevertheless, everyone went to go see that. And so, like, even though it wasn't like a full theater for this, it was like a half full theater, but the word of mouth after this film's first screening was such that, like, it was like, everyone that week was like, oh my God, I hope they're going to do another screening of The Perfection, which they did add, and then everyone went to go see it. But it didn't get a Netflix release until the following year, so May 24th, 2019. Reception is mostly positive. We've got a 71% on Rotten Tomatoes with an average score of 6.6 out of 10, 60 out of 100 on Metacritic, and Letterboxd users are a little bit more split with a 5.8 out of 10.
Oh, that reminds me, I need to re-log in on Letterboxd. I didn't do that last night.
I think that's come down a little bit from... Actually, you know what? I can't even remember if we managed to address that because we were recording so early in its run.
I don't know. Let us know, people. But yeah, okay. So Joe, take us away. Why don't we, let's talk about what happens in this movie.
Okay, we got so much to talk about. So, we open on Charlotte Wilmore, who is played by Allison Williams, and she is basically in the bedroom of her dead mother, Ruth, and she's overhearing her two aunts discuss the sacrifices that she has made to take care of her deceased mother. And this is intercut with images of her both screaming as well as flashbacks of a young Charlotte, played by Molly Grace, passing a young Elizabeth Wells, who is played by Mila Thompson, on the stairs carrying her cello.
I feel like when you watch this for a second time, it is immediately clear what the movie is telling you.
Yeah.
And what I just thought of now that I wasn't really thinking about last night, but all of the talk later in the movie about it's what's expected of us, that also relates to her caring for her ailing mother.
Yep.
You know, we're expected to take care of our parents when they get old and they get sick. And it's like, it does not matter what kind of relationship we have with our parents. We're just expected to do that. And we don't really know anything about her relationship with her mom. We just know that she used her mom getting sick as a way to escape.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how much goes unsaid in this film. Like, you're right, May, we don't know anything about her relationship with her mom. It could be a Suspiria level relationship where she's like, I've been looking to get out of this house and I finally found something I'm really good at. Oh crap, mom's sick, I gotta go back. But like, the movie leaves enough room for us to infer. But like, as the movie progresses, you very much get the sense that this was, okay, mom is sick, and that's maybe a bad thing, maybe a good thing, we don't know, but she definitely used this to get the fuck away from Anton.
But at the same time, and I know we will talk about later, like how damaged Charlotte is. Is that the right word? Does damaged maybe have a negative connotation to it?
I can't hear the word damaged without thinking of Jared Leto's Joker's forehead tattoo.
Jesus.
We don't realize how troubled, I will say, Charlotte is, because it's not only that she was, because at this point we don't know, but so Charlotte has been raped many times by this point in her life, and so she escapes his academy to go take care of her ailing mother. However, she's a child, and she doesn't have a parent to take care of her to help her overcome any of the trauma she has experienced from her time at the Back Off Academy, and she has to become the caretaker herself. So the movie doesn't really like do the work to like kind of go into how like all this stuff and how it's affected her outside of her actions later in the film. But I don't think it really needs to, because it's pretty obvious. And again, May, like you said, on a rewatch in this first scene, bam, like we get all this information right here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we get a title that says 1 Mission. And folks, you probably heard me say a couple of times over the last 5 years that I don't like title cards, like numbered title cards. These ones don't bother me too much because there's only 4 of them, so it's not a super egregious thing. Although I will say that people have used it as a bit of a slight against the film, as well as the backwards kind of like rewind piece. Like there's a surprisingly large number of people who are just like, oh, I don't know that we need the chapters. I don't know that we need the rewinding. Like, people should be fired for that.
For me, as someone with a background in theater, surprise, I like it because, sorry, queer theater kid? What? I like it because it makes it feel more like a play. It makes it feel more theatrical. Like, you have these very well-defined act breaks.
Yeah, I guess the argument is you could take them out of the film and it doesn't really affect it in any one way or the other. I will quibble, though, with the issue with the rewinds. I mean, look, I remember because people were like, oh, do we really need the second rewind? Like, we got it once, movie, you've showed your hand, why are we getting it again? I don't care. I like them both.
I like that they go back. I like that they kind of show you what happened from a different perspective. The actual seeing the film rewind and the VCR rewind noise, that's the part that I don't think is super necessary. It takes me out of it a little bit because, like, flashbacks are a thing. Those happen all the time. But the rewind thing, I feel like one of the only movies I've ever seen that work in is Funny Games.
Oh. Which is kind of appropriate then.
I agree. However, the thing with Funny Games is that the rewind in Funny Games actively changes the film because they rewind the film and then they change what happens from what we've seen before.
That's true.
This is just doing like we're going backwards. I mean, yes, we could just have a card that comes up and says like 30 minutes earlier or whatever the fuck. Honestly, it's that sound that you were talking about that adds a sense of playfulness to the film. So that's why I don't mind it as much.
Okay, fair.
Yeah, I was going to use the same word. I can definitely understand people's criticism of the second time. I think especially because it's happening so much later in the film, you feel like, no, wait, shouldn't we be barreling towards a climax at this point? But I would absolutely quibble with anybody who doesn't like the first one, at least, because I think it's such a clever way to bring us back so that we can really hit that twist hard.
Well, the thing with that one is, though, because like that is the first like big twist of the film, and it takes place almost halfway through the movie. So it's one of those things where it's like, oh shit, the movie I thought I'd been watching is not the movie I thought I'd been watching. So while I do agree that the second one is maybe less effective, by that point I'm so involved in what the movie's doing, I kind of laugh when the second one happens because I'm like, oh, you got me
again.
Oh, absolutely. It's just like, oh, oh, I should have known something different was going on here.
I should have expected this.
Yeah, exactly.
What a fool I've been.
Okay, so Mission opens with Charlotte walking down a Shanghai street, and she stops to consider a billboard of Elizabeth, now as an adult, played by Logan Browning, and then we transition to the Opera House, where Charlotte tearfully hugs Anton, who is played by Steven Weber, absolutely genius fucking casting,
Yeah.
and his wife Paloma, who is played by Elena Huffman.
She was Abaddon on Supernatural.
Okay.
That explains it, because Carmelo and Snyder they worked in the writer's room for Supernatural.
Oh, that makes. I guess she looks like a low rent Ashley Judd. And I'm sorry, she is very pretty. I don't mean low rent, but like she looks bad. She looks almost like Ashley Judd, but not quite like Ashley Judd.
Well, she doesn't have the star power of Ashley Judd.
I also think she looks like. I can never remember the actress's name. She played Inara on Firefly. I think she looks a little bit like her.
Oh,
Miranda Baccarin.
there
Yes.
we go. Yes,
Yes.
Marina Baccarin.
Yes, I think they look a little similar.
That's
Mhm.
yes.
I think that's a better one for me.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So I took a lot of notes last night while I was watching, which was really interesting because I was also a little high.
Ooh.
But her initial reaction when
Mhm.
Anton says her name, when you haven't seen the movie, you can't tell if it's like longing, like, oh my God, I'm finally reunited with this person who's been out of my life,
Yeah.
or if it's fear,
Mm-hmm.
because those two emotions look very similar on some people's faces. And I thought that was so effective on the rewatch. I was like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
they're not telling you what's going on here, but if you know, you know.
Oh yeah, it's all in her face, 100%. It's actually, I mean, as much as I hate the fact that I will never get to watch this movie for the first time again, because that first watch is just like so fun. Repeat viewings do reward you for this film. There are so many
my
things that you
gosh.
can't pick up on. Like that's not even clues. It's just pure like telegraph.
It's just there.
Things. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things that I've grown to appreciate, because I've watched this film numerous times. I actually covered this with Gina Radcliffe and Jen Adams on the Anatomy of a Scream Pod Squad earlier this year. So, like, I've watched this movie
Several times.
several times, yeah. And it's an interesting experience because you really do pick up different pieces. And what I find is that Allison Williams' performance is the thing that kind of gains strength in each of these rewatches. She's doing a very measured performance, especially in this sort of first like 2 acts, because you can read her reactions in multiple different ways, but once you know what the story is,
It's clear.
It's like, oh, okay, this is what I'm doing. This is how I'm trying to move Lizzie into the right position to do what I need to do, but I'm also kind of apprehensive and worried and so on. Like, it's a really brilliant performance.
Yeah.
It's also interesting because the first time you watch it, you're like, oh, she's really jealous of her.
Mhm.
Oh, no, and no, that's how it was billed, too. Like, I can't remember the
Yeah.
exact blurb at Fantastic Fest, but it's very much like a former cello superstar, like, arrives at a school to confront her replacement. And it's like, okay, I love that the movie plays on your expectations like that, and I was so worried when they released a trailer, because I was like, I don't know how they're going to
How they're gonna
market this
market it.
movie.
Yeah, I remember people saying, oh, this is cello Black Swan.
Yes.
I mean, somewhat
Sort
apt
of?
comparison
Kind
with some aspects of it, but not really.
Yeah, it both is and is not in some ways.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so Anton goes off and he's speechifying about how great the Back Off Academy is. That's where he teaches. That's where all of these musical prodigies come from. And he's specifically talking about Lizzie. They're there to scout and do this kind of like junior talent contest and bring one of these kids back to the States. But when he sees Charlotte, he's like, oh, and Charlotte is also here, blah, blah, blah. Like he's really talking them both up. But as he's talking, we're watching Lizzie and Charlotte kind of checking each other out. And again, this is, ooh, is it professional rivalry? Is it lust? Is it Charlotte, putting her plan into action?
I actually, see, the first time I watched this, I thought for sure, nope, she's going to like get revenge on this girl who took her spot. I never even thought, I didn't know this was a queer movie when I walked into it.
I definitely picked up on it when they started looking at each other. I was like, oh, so she's jealous of her and she's attracted
she wants to fuck her.
Which, like, I mean, that's definitely a lesbian thing.
I mean, it becomes very clear in a minute when when Lizzie starts talking about getting wet, but yes.
Oh, God. That...
Yeah.
Like, so
it's great.
I said off mic earlier, I watched this last night with my best friend Leanne, who is also queer, and when Lizzie says that, we both just looked at each other and went, oh.
It's like, it's so hot.
It's so hot.
I mean, Logan Browning is just like amazingly attractive, and she's such a fantastic performer, but like, she and Allison Williams also have really good chemistry.
They sure do.
Oh, yeah. And I love that, like, the sexual tension ramps up so quickly from being, like, sort of innocent looks to all of a sudden being so naughty. You know, they're observing this couple or this pair of
adulterers.
Yeah. Yes. And they're getting so turned on by it. And, like, that's kind of a natural thing. I know a lot of people are into that sort of dynamic, you know, fantasy or not. And so it makes sense. And the way it ramps up so quickly is just really fun.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you said, the pacing, right? Like, it just goes boom, 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 boom. We're not wasting time.
It's very fast. I mean, this is an 85-minute movie. Like, we have no time to waste. I will say one of my favorite visual pieces in this is, we should acknowledge that we do get the introduction to Theus, played by Mark Canborg, as well as Jeffrey, who is played by Graham Duffy.
They're so creepy.
Yeah.
They never speak. I never realized it. They don't have any dialogue in this movie. But
yeah, they do.
Do they?
Yeah.
Wait, what do they say?
When they first see her, they say how good it is to see her, but I think those are their only lines.
Oh, okay.
When she's reintroduced to them, you know, they say how much they've missed her, all of that.
Okay.
But that's it. They don't have any lines after that.
Well, when they become proper character, well, I'd say proper characters, as if they are just rapists. They are rapists in human skin.
Yeah. Oh, but they also teach instruments.
Yes. But I love the sort of visual groundwork that Shepard is playing here, because not only when we see that hug, like, it's a very awkward hug, and you're kind of like, oh, maybe Charlotte just doesn't have a connection to these two the way that she does with Anton. But it's clearly like, I've had to deal with too many rapists already. I can't deal with another two right now.
Yeah.
And then when Lizzie and Charlotte are properly introduced, like, it's not just across the crowd and they're looking at each other. There's this scene where, like, we can see the two of their faces extremely clearly. And Anton is still talking in the background, but his face is completely blurred, as though their connection is so strong that he has completely disappeared.
Ooh, I love that. I love that.
And it's really significant because Shepard uses deep focus all the fucking time. So, like,
it's
when
really
you're seeing
effective.
things clearly, it's like he wants you to see things clearly.
I wanted to also make note when Charlotte first hugs Paloma and Anton, the way she positions her arm, you can see her scars. And it's not super subtle. And at the same time, it's very effective. You see that and you're like, okay, so besides the issues with her mom getting sick and her having to be a caretaker, she has gone through some trauma.
Well, it's literally in your face because, like the scars in her arm are like the first thing that we have between our eyes and the camera. But it's... Again, the first time I watched this, I'm like, okay, like, so she is just a really obsessive artist who just was really intense about her practicing, and that's why she cut herself. That's why she has all these marks on herself.
Or like she had a breakdown, and then now she's come back. It's like, okay, you could kind of believe that, but again, if you know what this movie is doing, like, we get a brief glimpse of her cutting her wrist in the bath and her head also being shaved,
and then a little bit of ECT.
Yep,
right,
which is.
Yeah, it's rough. But this all happens when she's first hearing Anton speaking. So, like, she is triggered by his presence, his voice, his touch.
Yeah.
So the two women have been introduced. They're both a little bit awkward, but they're very like gushing about each other's talents. And then, yeah, we've got this performance. They're whispering secrets to each other. They're barely paying attention. It's very much a sexy meet cute where you're just like, oh, are these two gonna fuck? Oh, they're definitely gonna fuck.
It's erotic. That is what this
so
scene
erotic.
is.
Yes. It's very reminiscent of the like early 90s erotic thrillers that, Michael Douglas was in half of for some reason.
Because it's playing in voyeurism territory.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much about seeing, being seen, but also we get the impression that these women are also observant, like they're taking in their surroundings. And to me, that does feel like a little bit of commentary about how women have to move through the world. They need to be cognizant of like, okay, where are men? Where are threats? Where are potential exits and so on? And I think just the fact that these survivors of sexual assault are just so much more cognizant of who's around them is also very telling.
Yeah, it's also, I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. I basically, I'm sure a lot of people have talked about this. I don't wear headphones when I'm out in public unless I'm already on a train or a bus. I carry like a self-defense thing in my pocket at all times when I'm out in public by myself. There's a constant vigilance that needs to happen. And when you are a survivor of any kind of abuse, it gets so amplified. There's no rest when you're out in public by yourself. And even sometimes when you're with people, there's that constant shadow of what is going to happen to me.
Right.
And it sucks. It really sucks. It's exhausting. And for me, being a trans woman, it's even more amplified, unfortunately, because I am what you would call easily clockable. And, whatever. I don't care. I think I'm hot. And other people think I'm hot. And I've got great tits, and I've realized recently that my confidence level is directly in proportion to how much of my tits are showing on a given day.
Oh, nice.
Which is really fun. It's great. But
where do you live, Mae? Like what part of
I live in Chicago.
Okay.
So, yeah, and Chicago has a pretty big queer community, but there's a lot of division within it. We have 2 lesbian bars. And, one of them, thankfully, is like a 5-minute walk from my apartment. Yeah. But I don't go into a lot of queer spaces because a lot of them aren't super welcoming to trans women, which is unfortunate. And hopefully that'll be changing at some point soon. But back to the movie. Sorry about the tangent.
No, but...
So, yeah, within the context of the movie, they are definitely keen observers. And at the same time, the way Lizzie is talking about everything, you can tell she's very much under the spell of her abusers.
Yes.
And that's something that's hugely important because Charlotte already knew she was in trouble, but when she meets her in person, she's gushing over her. Yeah, she clearly does have actual romantic feelings for her. And she's like, oh shit, this girl's in trouble because of the way that she is talking about these people, because of the way she's talking about what she does for and with them. And who is it that first says the phrase special work? Does Anton say that?
I can't remember who says it first, but Lizzie definitely tells that to Charlotte when they're sort of out on the veranda, and Charlotte first sees the tattoo on her back.
Right.
And she definitely proposes to Lizzie, like, do you ever think about leaving back off? And she goes, no, Anton and Paloma are my family, but also there's the special work.
Right, and when you've seen the movie and you hear that phrase, it made me want to throw up. The things that people are deluded into thinking when they are under the thumb of abusers, it is astonishing.
Well, that's going to play a part in probably one of the pieces that Joe and I will pull up later about Charlotte not taking Lizzie's consent into consideration before making her chop her hand off.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, we'll have a whole conversation about that.
Okay.
Okay, so Lizzie is on vacation, and as a result, they plan to kind of make a night of it. So they talk about going out for drinks. On their way back inside, they notice that there's a man who is spontaneously vomiting, and he looks very ill. And a nearby woman suggests that this might be part of a contagion, like a hemorrhagic fever that's sweeping the south of the country. So that's very much laying the groundwork for scenes to come. And
also prescient, like we're predicting a pandemic.
Right? Yeah, I was going to say that too. We were watching it and Leanne goes, "Oh, shit."
Yeah. Yep. Some fun stuff there. So then we head back into the auditorium because Anton has demanded that Lizzie and Charlotte perform a duet, which of course is also a bit of foreshadowing for where we will end up at the end of the film. But they are very good together. You know, obviously they're both professionals, even though Charlotte hasn't played in a very long time. But again, the way that this is shot, I think, is really, really exciting. You know, we've got this deep focus so that we can see either the hands of one and then the full body of the other, and we're cross-cutting between the two of it. And then we also have that being cross-cut with their night out where they're kissing in the stairwell, they're dancing at bars, and yes, they are having sex.
Can we talk about how fucking incredible this piece of music is?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It is amazing. And, like, they at various points really do look like they are actually playing it. Their fake fingering, is very well done.
Yeah, I feel like I remember reading something that Allison Williams said in an interview where like they did actually try to study. And I mean, I think most actors will give it a go, and then they usually just like cut to a close-up so that you're just looking at the fingers.
But I think if it's ADR'd over, so I wonder if they were studying more the technique of how cellists were holding the cello and playing, so that way when they ADR'd the music over it, like it looked more natural.
Yeah, that's
likely
probably the case. I love them playing this music, and the way it makes them feel is, I mean, it's very, very heavy-handed metaphor, but the way they make it a metaphor for sex is, it's so appropriate.
Yeah, playing on stage to them is that gives them the same feeling that having an outstanding orgasm makes them feel.
Right, and that plays into Anton's whole shtick about getting close to God with the music.
Yeah. So everything does climax all at the same time, and then and then in bed, Charlotte tells Lizzie that she's never been with anyone before. I thought that this was interesting again in hindsight, because of course
she's been raped.
Well, she's been raped, but both of them have been raped. So in a way, they both know that that's not true. So they're not thinking of the rape in sexual terms, like they're defining sex and rape in completely different fashions, or neither one of them are acknowledging what has happened. Like they maybe haven't processed it. I
think that Charlotte does not consider all of her assault to be sex.
No.
You know, and I don't consider those times for me to be sex. Those were...
It's violation.
Right, exactly. Sex is something that is consensual and should be enjoyable for all parties. And when it's not that, it sounds silly to phrase it like this, but like you shouldn't have to count it.
No, not at all.
I technically was, I technically did not have consensual sex until I was 19 or something. But the first time I was assaulted, I was 15. I didn't count that. That was not sex to me. And so I still consider, whatever the fuck the term virgin means. But I still considered myself one until the first time I had consensual sexual relations.
Right. Also, virgin, it's like a label. It's such a silly thing that especially American society places on the word virgin.
It's so stupid. It's such a manufactured concept. And if you look at texts, that's a really hard word to say. When you look at writings about ancient rituals that call for virgin blood, what it actually means is blood from someone whose blood has never been used in a ritual previous to that.
Oh, really?
It has nothing to do with sexual purity. It has to do with whether or not the blood has been utilized before. Because if blood has been utilized before for any kind of ritual, that means
it's not virgin.
that it doesn't have the same potency.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. It's already been offered up.
Yeah, exactly. And that makes a lot more sense than whether or not someone is fucked.
Well, it's gendered.
Well, yeah.
Well,
Just like many things.
Yes.
just like
very
nearly
much
everything.
so. But did y'all see any critiques, or like maybe from men, talking about like, well, they've undergone this abuse. Why aren't they talking about it? Why aren't they seeking help? And I'm like, well, that's kind of the point the movie's trying to make.
Yeah, it's really hard to talk about that shit until you reach a certain point. And even when you reach that point, it's still hard to talk about it. It's something that you have to... Y'all have talked about this, I believe. When you come out,
Mm-hmm.
you have to come out multiple times. Sometimes you have to come out every time you meet a new person. And it can get exhausting. And it's the same thing with surviving any kind of abuse.
Mm-hmm.
If you are going to have any kind of relationship with someone, eventually that information is going to be necessary to disclose, depending on the level of intimacy. Because even with friends, if there are certain things that can be activating for you, and you're going to be spending time with people, they need to know. They need to know so that they can respect your boundaries and treat you with the care that you need in order to avoid any kind of activating events.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't matter if it's two survivors talking. It doesn't matter if they're survivors of the same person's assault. It's still not something that you can just talk about nonchalantly.
Well, I also think it's important to take into account that we are meeting these women as adults, but their abuse began when they were children. And their brains were developing, like, I mean, again, like, that's why he gets them when they're young like that, because it makes it easier to groom them and hypnotize them.
Yeah, it makes them more malleable and more susceptible because they don't necessarily realize that anything is wrong.
Yeah.
You know, they think they're receiving a normal punishment that all talented musicians get when they miss a single note.
Yeah. I mean, we'll talk more about the criticisms when we kind of get into the reveal of what has been happening to these women, but that is definitely one of the points that a lot of people took issue with, is the fact that A, it's not being talked about, B, that what Charlotte does to Lizzie is not consensual. But I didn't see any of the people who were doing those criticisms. No one acknowledged the fact that these two women are like survivors of sexual assault and that they are going through shit and they maybe haven't processed their trauma or even come to grips with it. Like, no one was that generous with these characters.
Some were even saying that Charlotte was just as bad as Anton, or at least in the same field. Like, they were playing in the same ballpark, because even though like Charlotte wasn't raping Lizzie, she was still like doing something to her, harming her body.
Mm-hmm.
So,
which I'm going to put a pin in that because I think that's where the conversation lies.
Yeah.
On a more positive note, I wanted to just go back and reference, there's a part where Lizzie says to Charlotte something about every time she watches her play, her heart skips a beat.
Yes, that's how she gets her to perform with her.
Right, and that line could be so goddamn corny, and instead, it gave me goosebumps. It is it's such a meaningful thing to say to someone who is a musician. To tell them that their music, their performance makes your heart skip a beat, that's an incredible thing to hear. If someone said that to me about my music, I'd probably start crying. In a good way.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Happy to.
Yeah. No, it's when music is your life, when it is so important to you, and it connects with someone else, it is one of the greatest feelings in the world.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a testament to how good their bond is, and also how the quality of the acting in the film that doesn't come off cheesy. It comes off as like deeply romantic.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, this movie is a lot of things, and one of those things is a romance.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a fucked up, twisted, violent romance, but a romance nonetheless.
For sure.
I wonder what Quentin Tarantino thinks about this movie. Actually, I don't give a shit what that man thinks.
So the two women make plans that Charlotte will join Lizzie on her 2-week vacation. So she's going to go travel around the country a little bit. And even though Lizzie says that they're very different, Charlotte reminds her that they actually have more in common than they may realize. And of course, just to drive the point home, that's when the camera sort of zero ins on the fact that Charlotte has a tattoo of her own.
Yeah, that will become important later.
There we go. Okay, so now we're into part 2, which is Detour, and we wake up the next morning. Charlotte provides Lizzie with some ibuprofen as well as hair of the dog because Lizzie is sick and she is not getting better even when they get food.
Oh God, that food. I'm sorry. If you like whatever kind of porridge or whatever that is, totally fine. When you are hungover, that is not what you want to eat.
Well, okay, my thing is this. So Lizzie, she's like, my head is pounding. And I was like, okay, look, I am notorious within my circle of friends for having really bad hangovers. Like, I get like the worst migraine you can imagine. It makes me so queasy, I can't even keep water down, so I'm throwing up all day. And I can't function. So if I am hungover, I can't even go to work because I'm like, I literally will be sitting there doing nothing. How this girl thought... she was gonna do like a cross-China road trip while she was hungover like
2
this.
weeks.
God.
Yeah, I love the part where Charlotte is like, "You sure we can just go back to the hotel,
She's
order
trying
some
to
just chill for the day,
right?" And it's just like, God, that sounds so nice. I want to like take a bath, rent a stupid romantic comedy, eat as much bread as my body will allow me to, and finally start to feel better.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, Lizzie has spent the last several years, I'm not having a lot of fun. So she really wants to go travel China and make this trip happen. But yeah, I'm right there with you, Mae. I would have absolutely stayed in that hotel for at least one more day.
Oh, yeah. 100%. But, you know, play through the pain.
Right.
Yes.
But also, it wouldn't have saved her anyway because, as we will eventually learn, Charlotte is the one doing all this.
I get...
Well, I mean, the hangover is just from getting real drunk and partying the night before.
Yeah, but the ibuprofen are not ibuprofen.
Well, right.
But I think, it was a bit self-serving because it would have been easier to have her do this in the hotel room than have her do it on the side of the road when they've been abandoned by a bus.
All right, so we're getting food. It's not helping. We do get Chekhov's meat cleaver when Charlotte pauses by a food stand there, and then we're onto the bus, and the subterfuge really begins at this point. So Charlotte brushes a bug off of Lizzie's jacket, and then she gives her a bottle of water as well as another handful of pills.
Okay, so... I know that there's a lot of really upsetting things in this movie, but Joe, and I think you will agree with me on this. This, to me, is like the scariest thing.
100%.
Again, like with one of my horrible hangovers, like I've been in a restaurant hungover, like trying to will myself not to throw up all over the table I'm at. And I can't imagine having to deal with that plus shitting myself on a bus in the middle of a foreign country.
Yeah, I mean, if my stomach is upset, I won't even get in my own car.
Oh.
If my stomach's upset, I'm going to be as close to a bathroom as possible.
Yes. I mean, to the point where she can't even take a step, because if she does, she will... Okay, actually, I'm sorry. You don't have to answer this. Show of hands, has anyone shit themselves in public?
No, but yes. I've peed myself in public a lot. I actually... I posted my first TikTok in December, and I was talking about OCD, and I actually have OCD, not like cute, quirky shit, but really frustratingly annoying stuff. And I talked about my OCD in relation to my brain literally requiring me to finish a task before I am allowed to do anything, even if I have to pee. And that has caused me to pee myself quite a few times in the last couple of years. Especially, like, I've always had a small bladder. I drink a shit ton of water. But since I started hormones, my bladder control has gotten even worse.
Oh no.
And yeah, there have been multiple times that I've peed, and unfortunately a couple in my car.
Oh no.
Well, Joe, so I heard you say yes to the shitting yourself, and I will go in solidarity. I have shit myself in public once when I was in high school. In school.
In high school? Oh no. That's almost as bad as what happens in this movie, where you're just like, this is not the place you want this to happen.
Oh yeah, it was because I, again, really upset stomach. It was 6th period out of 7. I was running to my class, and I begged I was like, can I please go to the bathroom? Can I please go to the bathroom? And she let me go. And it happened like as I was running to the bathroom, and instead of like taking the L and going to the nurse and be like, I need to go home or get pants, I stayed through my class. I tried to clean it up as much as I could in the bathroom, and then I stayed through my class and literally walked with like my backpack as low as I could, hiding my butt. Those pants. The kicker, I was wearing khaki shorts.
Oh, well, there's
So you
your
can't even
first
hide it.
mistake.
Never again.
Well, your
again.
fashion is really the problem in this story.
It would just be easier to be like, oh yeah, I was like a 5-year-old when I did that. No, I was like fucking 15 years old, shitting myself in high school.
Hey, our stomachs are susceptible to a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But I also feel like the issue is that things that happen to us as children, like, yeah, they may be traumatizing. We may kind of like carry that emotional baggage around with us for a while.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of easier to roll with it because like bad shit is happening, like dumb shit is happening to us all the time, right? Like I feel like my friends were constantly getting into trouble, making asses of themselves, getting punished for it. Like it was just a regular thing when I was a preteen and teenager.
Mm-hmm.
But then as an adult, you're like, oh, this is humiliating. This shouldn't happen to me anymore because I'm an adult, quote unquote.
Yeah. Yeah, thankfully, I've never shit myself in public. I definitely, like, I have had some bad bathroom experiences in public bathrooms, which is never pleasant. And, like, there was definitely, there was a day, so I bottomed and then went out for drinks, and, like, I don't remember what I had eaten for dinner, but my tummy was not happy, and neither was my butt. And I was just like, I was in and out of the bathroom so many times. I couldn't get drunk because I was just like so focused on how upset my stomach was. And I just like, I came home and I was like, that sucked.
That doesn't sound like a great way to end it.
No, but the sex was good, so.
Okay.
Joe, wait, do you want to share your story?
I can, yes. So, unfortunately...
You don't have to.
No, it's fine, because here's the thing. My story is basically Lizzie's story, only without the drugging. So, mine happened on public transit, where I was feeling super ill. I was trying to make the long commute from, like, basically downtown back to my house.
Oh, so you were an adult.
I was an adult. Yeah, this would have been near the end of college, maybe even when I was doing my master's. But
oh yeah, mine happened like a year ago.
Yeah, I mean these things happen as adults.
I hope we're validating so many listeners who've ever shit themselves. Like you are not alone.
It does happen. It honestly does. But mine was basically like, I need to get off this streetcar immediately. So even though I was not anywhere near home, I had to get off, and I literally went into the nearest restaurant, walked past everyone, went to the bathroom, passed out, and then woke up, had to basically leave underwear in this bathroom as this person is banging on the door like, sir, you need to come out of there. You cannot be in here right now. You are not a customer, blah, blah, blah. And I just walked ashamed out of there.
The walk of shame from pooping is so bad.
Mm-hmm.
Also, can we just talk about the app? I mean, we don't have to get super into this because I don't want to go on a really long anti-capitalist rant. But the idea that you have to be a customer to use a fucking
public
toilet,
bathroom,
it's ridiculous. It is so inhumane.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate it. It's like, people have to go to the bathroom. If you go to the bathroom outside in public, you get fined for it.
Yeah, you
and
do.
Can even get arrested. It's like, there's no accessibility, and it's definitely super ableist. It's obviously very discriminatory toward the houseless population. It's just, it's bullshit. It's bullshit. Mm-hmm. People have to go to the bathroom. Just let people go to the goddamn bathroom.
Ugh, God.
Okay, rant over.
Fantastic. So all this to say that things do not go well for Lizzie on this. Yeah, she's feeling very ill. We stop the bus. We get off so that she can go to the bathroom. We get back on. She initially seems a little bit better, but then she does puke on the window, and Charlotte notices there are maggots in that puke.
I think this is the only cheat kind of thing for me this movie does, because it's not on the same level as that My Bloody Valentine 3D scene or High Tension, where we're full on just seeing things that are actually not happening in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I can kind of make the excuse here because it's like, oh, like we're seeing it through Lizzie's eyes, whatever. But we're not really doing that because the movie is not through Lizzie's eyes. But nevertheless, it's fine.
I would push back on that because I do think that certain scenes are definitely from Lizzie's perspective and certain scenes are from Charlotte's. So, yeah, we are seeing what Charlotte sees, but I would argue that when we see the maggots, that's through Lizzie's perspective, and she has been primed to see something, not just because of Charlotte, but also because of what she saw with this man puking back at the opera house.
Right, and I love that Charlotte doesn't really have this carefully planned out. She is kind of improvising her way through it.
She is fucking Googling makeshift tourniquets on this bus.
But that's what I was going to ask, though. So, like, so it wasn't like, did you think she got the idea when she saw the man vomiting in the lobby?
100%. That's when she got the idea. That's when she was like, okay, I'm going to incorporate this into my plan to rescue Lizzie. And I think just relating it back to her being a musician, a lot of classically trained musicians have trouble improvising. They have trouble writing their own music because they focus so much on the craft of perfectly playing written pieces of music.
There's no room for improv.
Right, exactly. And so, like, because music is such an important part of this, because the two of them being extremely talented musicians is such an important part, showing Charlotte's ability to improvise is very, very interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, she's also a talented actress, all things considered.
Oh, yeah.
Like, she manages to pull off these reactions pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I also, when she's helping clean Lizzie up outside and acting as her caregiver, there is not a single bit of shame, embarrassment, or anything on her face. She actually really, really cares about Lizzie and is trying to take care of her through this.
Well, did you feel that way, I guess, on a first watch, before we get the real reveal of what's going on between these two? But like, when like, so after she makes her cut her hand off, you're like, oh, I guess that was all just an act.
I don't buy it as an act. I'm in agreement with you, Mae. I think that this is her caregiver, caretaker instincts kicking in. And I think that's why it's important that we heard that opening conversation with the aunts, because we understand that, A, she does know her way around like medicine, but also taking care of people. And to me, the other telling sign is when she's playing peekaboo with the little girl on the bus. It's that she has a kind of empathy for other people, but specifically also little girls. Like, she's interested in taking after people so that they don't have her similar experience. And I think to her, Lizzie is just a grown-up version of this little girl. Like, I need to protect you because I know what you've been through.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think her being that caretaker, her yelling at the bus driver and being so upset that he wants to leave them out there, that is 100% genuine, in my opinion. I think the acting that she does is just to kind of coach Lizzie to get her to where she needs to be.
Yeah, bugs, definitely bugs.
Right. Well, she can't come out and be like, hey, look, I was raped, I know you were raped, come with me, because she knows Lizzie's not going to just say, okay, sure.
Right, because when you are a survivor of abuse like that, it is so hard to come to terms with, how do I phrase this? The abusive relationship that I was in from 2006 to 2011, I couldn't leave. I couldn't leave because I was so afraid. I was so afraid of what would happen to me. And I don't know if I convinced myself or if I was just so well convinced by her that nothing was wrong. You know, you end up either deluding yourself or being deluded through the actions of your abuser into thinking like, I am safe. I am okay. This is normal. So there's no way that Charlotte would have been able to just have a conversation with her and get her out of that.
Mm-hmm. Especially because they don't have that relationship, right? Like, they've got a kind of reverence for each other's talent, and they had that one significant interaction when they were both children. But apart from that, they've known each other like 24 hours. Like, this is basically a hookup.
Yeah. Right.
And now we're into some heavy shit.
Yeah.
Right.
Literally.
God damn it.
It looked more watery. I don't think water has much weight.
Oh, no.
I mean, she's been drinking a lot of water. Yeah. Okay, so we do end up getting left off the bus. So things deteriorate to such a point that she's yelling. She is scratching her arms and her head, and then she bangs her head against the glass so hard that it cracks. And that's when the bus driver, who's played by David Sue, basically says,
"Get off.
You gotta get the fuck off of here."
He reminds me of Victor Wong.
From Tremors?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you know, Big Trouble in Little China,
Yes.
where he drives a bus. And I kind of love that because Victor Wong is always so like fun and funny and kind of sweet and goofy. This guy is the total opposite.
Yeah. I mean, I tried to put myself in his position. Like, you've got this American woman who is freaking the fuck out, and everyone else is like, the people on this bus are so terrified of Lizzie, and like,
they're also not mean about it, though. You know what I mean? Like, they still offer water. They offer the clothing, you know,
The
like
mask.
they are, the mask. They're trying to help. They are afraid, and they aren't bad people. The bus driver is an
questionable
asshole.
Yeah, stranding two vulnerable women on the side of the road, and like, it doesn't look warm, and Lizzie is wearing a skirt and a tank top.
And there's like nothing, there's no civilization around them. They're like in the middle, on a mountain in the middle of the woods or something.
Yeah, I mean, you know, to be fair, if you're going to get stranded in the middle of nowhere, at least it's pretty.
Yeah.
Hang out by the lake.
Yeah,
chop off your own
That is a
arm.
silver fucking lining, sure.
So we're on the move, and Lizzie is still having her panic attack to the point where she does actually start to see bugs crawling under her own skin.
Oh, God, it's so gross.
It's really rough, yeah. And then Charlotte kind of says, well, you know what you need to do. And then in, I think, one of the film's earliest big kind of guffaw what the fuck moments, produces a meat cleaver and just encourages her to go at it.
And that even before they actually reveal the twist after she chops off her hand, that is when I was like, oh my God, she did this. Because that's the one spot where the facade drops. That's the one spot where the look on her face when she pulls that out of her bag is like, it's so sly. And it's so like, oh,
I'm pulling one over on you.
Right. I did this right. I got you to where I needed you to be, and I don't need to pretend anymore.
But that's because the first time you watch this, though, then you're like, oh shit, this really is Cello Black Swan. She's just coming to get revenge on her. But there's something inherently funny about her, Mary Poppins,
so
Looney Tunesing, like pulling this cleaver out of her bag and just
Where did she get it from?
You know what you have to do. And it's like, does she?
Make a pizza? Chop up a couple of vegetables? My hand. Okay, sure.
It's such a funny moment. And again, it's played totally straight, but it's meant to be funny. And that's what it's that playfulness coming into the movie. Because when, again, you're watching this and you're like, holy shit, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah, well, and I think because of that immediate surprise and because of the look on her face, it's like, it does have a bit of comedy undertone to it. And your immediate question is she just evil? Like, is she jealous? Is she evil? Is something else going on here? But like, the idea of her just being this like evil manipulative villain who's taking pleasure out of watching someone cut her own hand off is like, it's kind of funny.
Well, and let's remember, so this comes out about a year and a half after Get Out, and audiences are primed. Yeah, audiences are primed for Allison Williams to be an evil white woman.
Yeah, like we've not talked about race, but it is obviously playing a factor here. And then I would also argue in the end with who gets to do what. But yeah, this is very much once again, we've cast this movie very smartly. So Steven Weber, we know him as the nice guy. Well, the sort of womanizer guy from Wings, but apart from that, he's the cheating cat in Single White Female. Like, those are the things that people know him from.
And he's the drug dealer in Reefer Madness.
Yes.
You two can just go off to a corner and
oh my
geek
god!
out for a
I
couple
just showed that to Erica and Leanne. We all got high last weekend and watched it, and oh my god, that was my 4th time watching it, and it's only my first time watching it A, while high, and B, with other people.
Oh, it's so fun with the people.
It is
Very important.
Such a hoot when you're watching it in a group. It is such a hoot.
I think 3 years later validation, but I so appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. That's another one that I knew about it and I didn't watch it until y'all covered it. And I was like, God, this is amazing. I had seen the original propaganda film with riff tracks because riff tracks riffed it. And
of course.
If you haven't watched that, it is absolutely fantastic. But yeah, no, that movie's great. And Steven Weber is he's so good at being a slimy douche.
He's a multi-hyphenate, both in terms of that and just, he can dance and sing and he can act.
For sure.
Okay, but yeah, so this is when we get our first rewind. So yes, the whole film rewinds to very quickly re-show us the whole previous movie, but from a different perspective.
Yeah, it's selected highlights from the day from Charlotte's perspective. So couple of different instances. We see her using her mother's hallucination-inducing medicines, see her grabbing the cleaver, faking, seeing bugs, and also, looking up how to make a tourniquet on her phone. And then we get it's not the new chapter heading, but it does precede it by just a couple of seconds. So we see 3 weeks later, Boston, and then 3, home.
I will say that the Lizzie's mistake here, I think this is what most audiences catch, is that those ibuprofen don't look like ibuprofen, and they're coming out of a prescription bottles, and yeah.
It's not ibuprofen, it's ivermectin.
I mean, the problem is that by the time she would realize it would be on the bus, and she's already taken a bunch of them back in the hotel, so she's already hallucinating at that point.
Right, and she may think they're prescription strength or something. They may be naproxen, or however you say that.
Sure.
She basically is just saying hey, give me something to help with this pain, and she assumes, of course, that she's safe with Charlotte.
Mm-hmm. Right. That is the other thing. I mean, we can debate whether or not Charlotte is right to do this to Lizzie, but I feel bad because I don't know that there was a way out of this for Lizzie that didn't bring her some kind of harm.
Well, but again, it's a thing where it's saying why are we focusing on what is what Charlotte is doing right? It is what this character, who is very flawed, thinks is right in the time. But is the movie necessarily endorsing her methods? I don't know about that.
I think she's very clearly treated, especially at this point in the film, it's she is that crazy bitch. Okay, so in Home, we've technically already been introduced to Zhang Li, who is played by Eileen Tian. She's basically the girl who won the performance that they were observing in the Opera House, but now she is over in Boston at the Backhoff Academy, and she's being given a tour by Paloma, and this ends at the chapel. So this is our introduction to this revered space, and we get Anton celebrating the acoustic perfection of the room, confirming that only great artists get to play there, artists such as Charlotte and Lizzie.
I'm not gonna lie, I would kill to make some beautiful guitar drones in that space because they did a really good job with the layout. It's not perfect by any means, but the way it looks is very indicative of how an acoustically perfect space would look for the most part.
Well, I was actually going to ask, do y'all think it's intentional that all the raping occurs in a chapel?
Oh, 100%.
Very deliberately so.
Yeah. There's a big metaphor here for music as religion, and the chapel is where you get close to God, and, to them, the otherworldly nature of the music is akin to sex. You know, there's all of these things that tie together. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
I will say one of the things that you notice a lot more on rewatches is how often Paloma is touching Zhang Li in these scenes. So technically Zhang Li's mother is there on the tour, but then she like gets put in a cab and disappears from the film. But there's a number of instances where you see either Paloma or Anton putting a hand on a shoulder or like guiding her by the arm and stuff. So it's very much an intimate, you know, parental, but also, when we understand the context, predatory touch.
Paloma's such an interesting character, though. Do y'all read her as a former
by Paloma.
as a former student of his?
No, I read her as someone who was attracted to his perceived power and influence, who is probably a great lover of music, and because of what he affords her, the ability to witness this greatness in musicianship, she doesn't just turn a blind eye to what's happening. She helps facilitate it.
Yep.
And that's something that happens a lot in abusive relationships as well.
I was going to say, like, pulling back to, like, oh, like, what is the message of this movie, or, like, the metaphor of this movie? And it's like, no, like, yes, obviously, like, we have these rapists, but there are also a lot of bystanders, and so sometimes women are also complicit in it. Not the survivors, obviously, but, like, other women are complicit in these things.
Well, and actually, that is a good point you just brought up. Sometimes survivors themselves are complicit and do enable. And, you know, Anton makes it very clear that his father taught him and Jeffrey and Theus the same way. Right. This is essentially a never-ending cycle of abuse that they're instituting at the back off that is horrific and horrendous, but they just accept it. They accept this is the way it has always been. This is the way it should be. And that, again, ties into the themes of religion.
Yeah.
You know, people accept what they are told and they go along with it even when they see it doing great harm because of the spoils that it brings them.
Oof.
Well, and maybe it's because we're tying this to a grand high order, right? Like, Meg, you've referenced religion numerous times, and like every time we talk about things like the perfection and the chapel, it's done in such a way as though this is like the closest we can get to God through music and so on. But I think it also then gives people that out, whether they even intend for it to or not, to say, oh, well, the thing that we're doing is so important, the great work, right? It's worth the sacrifices. Like, Anton literally tries to rationalize this to Charlotte near the end of the film, where he's like, yeah, but think about like the education that you got, like the work that we were doing, isn't that valuable? And she's like, I was a fucking child. No, you fucking raped me.
Yeah, exactly. People justify their abusive actions by whatever means necessary.
Right.
And, you know, they will talk about all of the good things that they've done for the people who they are abusing. They'll talk about all of the good things they do separate from that, as if it somehow absolves them of their responsibility.
It's anything to, because again, they're not in the wrong. Also, shades of this, like the whole like, we're playing the perfection to get closer to God, and like mixed with like this torture. It's bringing me shades of Martyrs a little bit.
I can't watch that movie. Even listening to your episode, I was like, whoa.
It's a rough watch.
There's a reason it ends up on all those extreme lists for sure.
Yeah.
Didn't Psychoanalysis do an episode of comfort horror where that was someone's comfort horror movie?
It is, yeah.
Well, but that's actually an important conversation for this movie too, as how rape revenge films can be comfort horror for some people as well.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Martyrs isn't rape revenge, though.
No. It's more so just how movies with really disturbing and or triggering content can be comfort movies for some people.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the episode I did with them, my comfort movies are the Fear Street movies, and there's a lot of fucked up shit that happens in those. But I love them.
Yeah.
There you go. So that night, a despondent Lizzie arrives and basically she relates what happened after the cleaver and the hand severing. She very clearly has now just a stump. And she tells Anton that the police couldn't do anything because that fucking bitch, Charlotte, had already left the country and because technically Lizzie did everything to herself, which is interesting. Like, it's something I really hadn't considered when we watched it all go down the first time. I thought, oh, wow, Charlotte's going to catch this. And then you realize, oh, yeah, technically Lizzie did do it to herself.
And that is another thing that's an abuse tactic is, and like, I am not positioning Charlotte as an abuser, but because Lizzie is a survivor of abuse, it's interesting that Charlotte does use some of those same tactics where the abuser positions their target to inflict pain upon themselves or to do things to exacerbate the situation so that the abuser then has an excuse to punish them.
Right.
Joe, can I bring in this piece?
Sure. Yep.
So yeah, there's an article that was written around about a month after this movie came out, and it's The Perfection Punishes Its Victims with Violence to Protect Them from It by Akshita Prasad from June of 2019. And she kind of goes through like a lot of her issues with this, but she concludes her piece by saying this. The Perfection repeats the overused, cliched trope of the knight in shining armor. Charlotte's desire to save Elizabeth has nothing inherently wrong with it, but the fact remains that this wasn't Charlotte's call. Charlotte violated Elizabeth by mutilating her, and stating her abuse at the hands of Anton as justification in no way diminishes the violence of Charlotte's actions. The most disturbing thing about The Perfection is that it punishes its victim for being a victim of sexual violence, and doesn't seem to take notice of the fact. Elizabeth loses a hand for being raped by Anton, even if in Charlotte's understanding it is to save her from further abuse. Apart from the years-long trauma of being sexually abused, Elizabeth now has to live with a permanent disability that demands her to pay the price of not picking up a bow again, ergo, giving up on being a cellist and keeping her away from music, something Elizabeth dedicated her entire life to. Charlotte might argue that by mutilating Elizabeth, she was saving her, but all she does is punish the victim for her abuse.
Ooh, I have some feelings about that. Honestly, you know, hindsight's 20/20, but if someone had done something to hurt me that would have woken me the fuck up from either of the abusive relationships that I was in, yeah, I would have been hurt, but eventually I would have thanked them. If I had the opportunity to escape either of those situations sooner, I can't even tell you how much of a difference that would have made in my life.
I wonder again if it's the whole, because again, the film, I do think that the climax of this film kind of frames as like, yeah, like, fuck yeah, like, what do we call them, Joe? Good for her endings type things.
Good for her.
And I understand this argument. I really, really, really do. But again, we're going into, okay, well, right and wrong. And is the film necessarily endorsing Charlotte's actions? Specifically, drugging Lizzie, having her amputate her own hand, blah, 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 blah. I mean, again, to me, it's just a flawed character who's doing what she thinks is the best course of action based on her own experiences of being sexually abused.
Yeah, I think the movie makes it very clear that, like, she wasn't right to do that.
Right.
It so happens that later, you know, the result is that it helps Lizzie, and Lizzie does eventually forgive her for it. And that's huge. That is huge, because Lizzie is the only one who can determine whether or not that was right or wrong.
Yeah, I think this is something that's implicit that I'm reading in a lot of the criticisms, particularly around this issue of consent with regard to what Charlotte does to Lizzie. I'm wondering if what people were looking for was they needed some kind of acknowledgement in the text to say, like, Lizzie says, what you did to me is not okay, but thank you. Because what she ultimately just says is, you're right. Like,
well, okay.
I think people needed it spelled out more explicitly. But I do think that this is also, to play devil's advocate to myself and these people, I think it's also, again, what we want versus what the film is necessarily doing. And the fact that Charlotte is that flawed, complicated character, she's not perfect. But I think we either want her to be, or we want her to be better, because at the end of the day, we want to be able to have that good for her, fuck yeah kind of moment. And it's really hard when you realize, oh, well, Charlotte did victimize Lizzie to a certain degree.
Well, and I think also, I mean, to pull it even further back, I think some of these critics too, they're saying, okay, because to me, it's like, Lizzie is fine. Like, clearly, I mean, not fine, but like, in the end of the day, she is okay and forgives Charlotte for what she has done to her. But I think maybe in some of the minds of some of these critics, it's okay, yeah, but that's a character in a movie that is written by two men and a woman.
Mm-hmm.
So what are they saying about this by having Lizzie be so okay with this? Sure. On a level, I get it. But then I'm also kind of like, but that's the movie we're telling here.
Right. Also, she's not okay with it.
Yeah.
She's not just happy-go-lucky like, oh, cool, thanks for cutting my hand off. She comes there and is like ready to kill her. And then in the moment decides not to because she comes to terms with the fact that what Charlotte did saved her from even more suffering. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that's where what we were talking about earlier comes in. What is the film's responsibility? It doesn't have a responsibility. Its responsibility is to tell the story it's telling and to hope that people enjoy experiencing that story.
Well, and I do wonder, though, if it's the fact that this is a playful movie that is meant to have some humorous parts in it. And again, a movie I would describe as very fun. I wonder if there's like a juxtaposition of that with this really brutal subject matter that is
absolutely
more difficult to swallow. It makes it more difficult to swallow.
I absolutely think that that's playing a fact into it. Like, I'm thinking back to our conversations about Promising Young Woman as well, right? Because that movie has, the candy-colored visual aesthetic. It's got like all the pop songs and that kind of stuff. But then at the end of the day, it's like, well, I'm also trying to do, to a certain extent, a message about rape culture and, punishment and vengeance and that kind of stuff. I don't think that we can unilaterally say, oh, well, this film doesn't have a message. It's not trying to do something. It is in there. And it's going to be difficult, especially for people who are not okay with like rape revenge films. Like mileage may vary for everybody. And I think that's one of the struggles I had with some of the critics' readings is that it felt like they wanted rape revenge films to be one specific thing and that all women particularly are going to have a similar reaction. And I'm like, well, no, because I know a lot of women who really like rape revenge films and they like them messy and they like them brutal. And as you said, Mae, they like them cathartic at the end. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that they have to be polished. Yeah. So I think that's one sort of danger is pretending like, oh, there's only one way to do a rape revenge film because there's only one way to receive them. And that is just completely incorrect. But at the end of the day, it's also like, oh, well, this is a movie that, as you said, Trace, numerous times, it's fun, it's playful, it's doing, things that are enjoyable. But at the end of the day, it's still talking about sexual assault.
Well, and I will say, too, that one of the common complaints about rape revenge films is the rape itself. Like, oh, like we always have to go through this really brutal thing before we get to the revenge and blah, blah, blah. Why we have to show that. And I actually will commend this film for being a rape revenge film that doesn't have the rape scene. Like, we know that it happens, and that is enough.
Right, it's implicit, not explicit, and I really appreciate that about it because it still manages to make you feel uncomfortable, uneasy, angry.
Yeah.
But they don't show it. It's not exploitative in that sense. Yeah. And that's another reason that I really appreciate it. And I pulled up my original Letterboxd review from this, and I didn't rate it when I watched it, but I wrote like a lot and, talked about having mixed feelings about the movie, really enjoying parts of it, the acting being incredible. But I guess originally I felt like there were a lot of very upsetting elements to the film that felt disingenuous.
Okay, there we go.
Which is really interesting to look back on that. But I also, I watched that in literally one of my darkest periods. I watched it December 22nd, 2019. And 3 days later on Christmas, I had like a bit of a breakdown, and a couple months later I almost attempted. And so I was in a really bad place the first time I watched this movie, and I think part of my feelings toward it were definitely because of that. It was definitely because I was in this dark place and I was feeling a lot of what Charlotte was probably feeling.
Had you rewatched this movie between then and now?
Nope.
Interesting.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, like, a few important things happened between those times, which is that, oh, wait, that was 2019. Oh, no, I was in a very dark place then, too. Yeah, I had a few bad years.
A couple of dark patches.
Yeah, but, you know, like, in 2020, I started transitioning. At the beginning of 2021, my wife and I unofficially split up, and then we officially split up the day after I almost attempted, and then I finally started presenting Femme full-time, and then, like, 6 or 7 weeks ago, my divorce was finalized. So there have been a lot of changes for me since the last time I watched this movie, and I think that's definitely why my perspective on it changed. And what's interesting is that going into watching it this second time, I had nothing but positive associations with it.
That is fascinating. That to me is fascinating, because the only time you'd seen it before, you had mixed feelings about it.
Right. And I'm glad I did not reread my review before watching it this time.
I mean, I think if nothing else, that's a testament, like a bit of a unique situation, because you've had very high highs, some pretty low lows by the sounds of it. But I think that's also an accurate reflection of what happens when you do have either a really high or a really low reaction to a film the first time. Like, again, I can't encourage anyone, especially if you're time poor, to just continually go back and rewatch movies that you had like a very strong reaction to. But it is a bit of a testament that when you're in a different state of mind, when you've experienced different things, like when some time has passed, your response to a film can be completely different. And to kind of bring it back to some of these reviews that, you know, not always positive about this film. Do want to give them a shout out, because many of them did reference the fact that they were happy we didn't see the sexual assault and that it is just implied and it's not explicit. But I almost wonder if people would feel different about this film now that we're a little bit removed from Me Too.
Yeah.
But also now that they actually know what the film is, as opposed to, I'm suddenly surprised. Oh shit, this is a rape revenge film.
Right.
I didn't realize that's what I was signing up for.
Well, that's the other thing too, right? Because again, I mean, obviously the subject of rape is triggering for many reasons. So imagine not knowing what this is going into it, and then being like 40 minutes in, oh shit, it's a rape revenge movie.
Yeah, I do love that at a certain point, you're like, is this going to be like a zombie movie? Is it, you know, when you see the guy puke, and you hear those people talking about it, you're like, oh, is this going to be a zombie movie? Is this going to be like a plague outbreak movie? What is going on here? You know, and then it turns into like body horror. And you're like, oh my God, this is fucking gnarly. And then, you know, it turns into what it is. And you're like, holy shit, I have been on a wild ride.
And that's what I meant, right? I can never watch this movie again for the first time, but I'm constantly chasing the high that this movie gave me, where it's like, I don't know from minute to minute what kind of movie I am watching.
Right.
Where is this all going?
I kind of felt that way watching Bodies, Bodies, Bodies the first time.
Oh, I could see that a little bit.
You know, I was like, I have no idea what's happening. I have no idea what's going to happen. I am just having fun.
Along for the ride.
And honestly, I saw that a second time in the theater. So I saw it twice in the theater, and it was just as fun the second time.
Oh, it's super fun. But it's more so even, but like this film is like, it's being unpredictable with its genre. Like,
yeah, for sure.
It's not even just where the plot's going. It's literally what kind of a horror movie am I watching? And I love that about it.
Yeah, I love that it pulls off. I guess if another movie tried to do this and was unsuccessful, it would feel like a hodgepodge. And this doesn't.
Oh, sure.
It feels very cohesive because all of the different elements just kind of flow together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we can probably nearly jump ahead to the last part. There is just one part that I want to address, because I love that when Lizzie, you know, she comes back to the academy and she's like, okay, I'm with family, I'm safe again. And then the next morning they basically kick her out. And I do think it's a really important thing, because it's really hard to watch Lizzie say, if you accept me, the music world will accept me. And I love that Anton won't do the dirty work. He literally turns away from her to look out the window and leaves it to Paloma to say, well, there are other girls that we need to house and train. And he only basically says, your gift is gone. And then she's booted out.
I'm sorry, Paloma's exact line is, Lizzie, this is a music conservatory, not a convalescent home.
And then she apologizes.
Oh my God.
And then she's like, get the fuck out.
Yeah.
It's funny, though, because here's the thing, and I know it's speaking to his perfection, but wouldn't you think he might be like, ooh, but if I had the world's best one-handed cellist, that's gonna be the thing for me.
No, because he sees her as broken. He
Exactly.
sees her
Yeah,
as damaged.
she's worthless.
She's worthless to him. And especially as someone who is an abuser, he didn't get to break her.
Oh.
If he had gotten to break her, he would have loved it. He would have reveled in it. But because he didn't get to break her, he didn't get to damage her, he just sees her as something damaged, not as like a trophy that belongs to him.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, the biggest fuck you in that scene is that when he stands up and he walks past her, he puts his hand heavily on her right shoulder. You know, she's sitting there with her fucking arm in a sling. It's only been 3 weeks since she cut her own hand off on the side of the road. And he puts a bunch of weight on her fucking shoulder. Like, what a giant fuck you.
I didn't even notice that. God.
Well, it's because she doesn't matter to him anymore, right?
No,
like
right.
she is just taking up oxygen and space in his sex rape parlor. So he's like, well, I've got this room full of young girls that I need to be out grooming because you're nothing to me anymore.
Right, it's a holy place and she is no longer divine.
But even to put us more in his mindset, I mean, so like flashing forward, you know, she goes to Charlotte's house, she kidnaps her, brings her back. They have Charlotte tied up in the chapel, blah blah blah.
Right.
Charlotte is like telling her, like you raped us, blah blah blah, and he looks at Lizzie and just goes, Lizzie, were you abused? Is that what you'd call what we did for you? To play that music? To achieve the perfection? It was a gift! Okay.
Well, and before the second twist happens, before you realize that, like, Lizzie has come back there with Charlotte and they're in cahoots, that is honestly an understandable reaction. Again, it is like, I hate to use this term, but it's kind of like Stockholm Syndrome, where your abuser can do no wrong. In your eyes, they are your savior. And what they say is the truth. And there's no fighting that. There's no denying it. There's no arguing against it. So you either agree with them or you get punished more.
I saw a bunch of people try to make the argument like, oh, well, this scheme would never work in real life. People would have found out and they would have called him out because he's graduating all these women and eventually somebody would tell. But I was like, no, he's got them from such a young age.
Yeah.
You know, you think about Lizzie before you realize that, yes, she is actually working in cahoots with Charlotte. This moment to me confirms, oh, he's graduating all these students who are just going out into the world being perfect cellists. But they're like Lizzie and Charlotte at the beginning of the movie. They either don't know what's happened to them or they haven't processed it because they're still under his spell.
Right, and you also, you run into a lot of instances, especially when, like, entire families are being abused by one person in the family, where even if the abuse is not being enabled by other members of the family, the abuser is still protected. You know, so, like, have y'all watched Sandman?
No.
Okay, so there's one situation where a child is being abused by a father figure, and the mother figure wants to protect the child, but also cannot stand up to the father figure because she's afraid of abuse. And you end up with situations like that a lot. And I think any of the past graduates, any of the other girls and women who achieved the perfection, who played down in the chapel, because it's not all of the students, it's not the day students.
It's only the best ones, yeah.
Right, it's only the best ones. And they're going out into the world and they're afraid to speak out because they know it'll ruin their reputation. Because no one's going to believe them over the word of Anton. Because look at what he produces. Look at these brilliant students that he and his family have been putting out to the world.
Mm-hmm.
And really, we've seen that repeated in real life as a result of the Me Too movement, which is strangely not something that people brought up in their reviews, but it is, right? Like, all of these women were terrified of coming forward against Harvey Weinstein because he was too powerful.
Right.
So even if they did recognize what had happened to them, they were just like, I can't risk everything I've worked for because I've already been hurt.
Right. And you look at what happened to Brendan Fraser. Fraser. He was blacklisted by the film industry because he tried to speak out about the abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happens.
It's also like, I mean, like, this is like semi-related, but it's like whenever like, I've seen people comment or like say like, oh, well, it's really the woman's fault for staying. Why would they stay in the relationship if they're getting beat? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And it's like, you...
tell me you don't understand how power works.
Right. I cannot tell you how many times I tried to talk to people about my old abusive relationship, and they would say, well, why didn't you just leave?
Yeah, it's so easy, right?
And it's just like, because I was completely convinced that no one else would ever love me, and if I left, I would die alone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's also just like the people that say that, I'm like, do you have no empathy whatsoever? Like,
right.
So you're saying because someone chooses to stay in an abusive relationship, they deserve to be abused. Like that's what you're saying. Like, they had it coming. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. People are garbage.
Yeah, it's terrible. But you know what, though? At least in this movie, the abusers get what's coming to them.
They sure do.
True, yeah.
I'm going to let us move on in one sec. I just want to mention one little thing.
Sure.
When Charlotte wakes up on the couch and she's talking to Anton, and she just lays out that she knows everything he did. And he sits there and he spends like 30 seconds feigning ignorance, doing that, what? Me?
Yeah.
What are you talking? And then all of a sudden his face changes and he just immediately drops the facade and is like, come with me, bitch.
Yeah.
It's so effective.
Yeah.
But him feigning ignorance is like, that's gaslighting 101.
Oh, 100% it is.
You know, not just feigning ignorance to outside parties, but feigning ignorance to your own target.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a classic tactic of abuse, of pretending that you don't know you've done anything wrong.
Mm-hmm. It very much feels like, okay, I'm going to keep the mask on to see how far she goes with it. And if it's not past a certain point, then I'll just continue to wear it. But if she goes past, then I'm going to have to take her back down to the chapel and we'll have to deal with her.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which is, of course, what happens. So we punch her out, and then she wakes up, and this is the mic drop moment. I think when we talked to Eric Carmelo, he mentioned that this was like one of the scenes that they were the most proud of, is this under the dress shot of the Jimmy Choo stilettos with the ankle bracelets, and then the big reveal that she has basically been trussed up like a doll and she's going to be made to perform, or else we're going to sexually assault this little girl, Zhang Li, who has just arrived.
The shot when she first wakes up in the chapel, though, on the little stage it's
gorgeous.
It's a painting. It is a fucking painting.
The tableaus that are on this chapel, I mean, we'll talk about the final shot in a minute, but I guess I never thought about the fact that, so not only do we have a secret rape revenge movie, but we are also threatening to rape a child in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Oof.
Yep.
And then when Charlotte inevitably fucks up because she hasn't fucking practiced in
10 years.
A decade, he sends Zhang Li away with Paloma and then says, well, I'm not just a random pervert. Like, it's such a perfectly delivered Steven Weber line, but also you're just like, oh my God, you know what kind of monster you are.
Yes, exactly. And those are honestly the most dangerous kind. Well, no, I'm
the ones that don't.
I mean, yeah, the ones who don't know what kind of monsters they are more dangerous, actually. So I rescind my comment.
But they're all bad. They're all bad.
Yeah.
It's very cunning, this, right?
Did y'all notice when she does hit the wrong note, the camera shakes momentarily when it's on Anton's face?
That makes so much sense.
It's very subtle.
Mm-hmm.
And
visual cues.
if you're not paying attention, you probably won't notice. Leanne didn't notice, and I didn't notice the first time I watched it, although the first time I watched it, apparently it was like 1 o'clock in the morning. But yeah, I noticed it, and I went back last night so that she could see it, and it's so well done because it's a little bit subtle, but it's like, it's this vibration out of this divinity.
That I'm sure Richard Shepard's doing a very good job with all of his TV shows, but it's like a thing where it's like, God, this man has only made 3 feature-length films, and like he has talent, like he's a good director. I mean, and that's fine. But remember that because they were going to do another pilot with Sarah Michelle Gellar, but that went down the crapper.
More poop jokes, huh?
Yeah.
No, it got left on the side of the road, like Lizzie's hand.
Terrible. Yeah, so Anton is like, cool, I've got minions to do this. So he leaves, and he basically is just going to leave the dirty work to Theus and Jeffrey. And so Lizzie decides that she's going to stay. Also, shout out to Lizzie's, like, feminine tux, because I love that fucking outfit.
Yes.
It's gorgeous.
Wait, but before Anton leaves, he calls Charlotte a vessel of God.
Yep.
What a fucking prick.
And, like, it's interesting because a lot of abusers have a God complex themselves. He acknowledges that he's not God. He himself is not divine. He requires these other people to get close to God.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to sound absolutely ridiculous, but he reminds me of, like, a Dr. Channard from Hellraiser 2 kind of figure, where he's like, I'm looking for the conduit, and like it just so happens that these women and their ability to play is what gets him closer to where he wants to be. But also, he's so self-important and narcissistic that he thinks he's worthy, and he's the one who gets to arbitrate all this.
What a piece of shit.
That's not stupid. That's correct.
No, wait,
I mean, it's a ridiculous comparison. Like,
no, it's not. It's totally apt.
Let me talk about the penis-headed villain from Hellraiser 2.
Hey, I sent you a picture of my tattoo. I just got the lament configuration as a tramp stamp, okay?
It looks great.
Thank you. Oh yeah, Trace, I have to send that to you. It's real good.
Solve this puzzle, bitch.
I told Erica next time she tops me, she has to say, you opened the box.
And then we came?
Yes, exactly.
Oh my god.
So we've left Charlotte to be punished for making a mistake. And this is when we get, the stumpy potential rape. But instead, Theus and Jeffrey just die. And it's revealed that they're working in cahoots, and we get a lovely little smooch.
Question. What if that poison hadn't kicked in? Like when it did?
We would have drawn it out, maybe.
Just watch the movie, Trace.
Well,
it's okay.
Maybe she still would have done it, but it would have been like she's like feigning aggression when it's like, but no, she likes it.
Also, the piece of music that's playing during this part is very different. It's a more piano-forward piece, and it's very reminiscent of Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross score work.
Oh,
and
really?
as someone who's a gigantic Nine Inch Nails and Trent and Atticus fan, I really appreciate that piece of music. The score in the entire movie is incredible, but this piece in particular, I love that it's this very different mood and very different tone than anything else that has come before it.
Because it's about to get really bombastic, because once we do the rewind again, we're then playing Mozart's Requiem in D minor, and it's like, ooh!
Yeah, which is basically where we're at. So we do the rewind a second time, and this is back where we realize, okay, Charlotte is going to rationalize her actions right after Lizzie has done the hand chop. And I think it's really important. She literally says, Anton never loved you. It's not that he didn't like you. It's not that he didn't respect you. This is literally about dangerous love. Lizzie needs to let go. This is not someone who actually loves or values you. And I think it's really important that she says it was just rape.
Yes. Well, and yeah, I get that maybe this is too quickly of a revelation for Lizzie for some viewers, but she says, I should fucking kill you, but you were right. And then after Charlotte says that they raped me, they raped you, it was just rape. Lizzie says, it took this happening for me to fucking see it. So, I mean, like, we have a realization. It just maybe it's because we don't see her process all of this. She just says it. It's like, cool, easy, done. They're on a team now.
Yeah, so I'm going to bring in a couple more reviews, some that I've been alluding to throughout the episode. So one is by Aja Romano for Vox, and it's Netflix's The Perfection Learned All the Wrong Lessons from #MeToo. And Romano says, another main reason the film can't pull off a semblance of emotional and psychological realism, to me that's red flag number one, is that Charlotte's entire character arc is at best extremely over the top and at worst reads like a troubling white power fantasy.
What?
Oh.
Yeah, so this is people reading, is there a white savior complex in this film where Charlotte feels that she needs to save this black woman who otherwise would remain indoctrinated to this man?
Okay, white savior fantasy makes sense. White power fantasy, I was like, oh, what?
It's an odd word choice, yeah. This is why we need editors at sites as well.
Y'all can correct me on this, but isn't the white savior trope more so? I mean, isn't the cause of that like a black person or a person of color experiencing troubles because of their race?
Yes. Generally.
I would argue, I mean, yes, it is a white woman coming in to save a black woman, but it's not because of Lizzie's race. But never, I'm not trying to like fight that.
I think it's now sort of being used interchangeably.
Okay.
Right. Normally, like, a white savior thing would be when someone who's white comes in to rescue an entire group of oppressed people who, you know, have been oppressed because generally of other white people. And while Lizzie is a woman of color, I really don't think her race plays into why she was being abused or treated the way she was. She was treated the same way as all of the victims.
Actually, even I'm looking at this review, Joe. Yeah, they pull quote some other reviews. Where it's like, oh yeah, this movie has been described as either a jaw-dropping feminist must-watch and a symphony of revenge, while others have read it as misogynistic garbage and an exhausting narrative of sexual violence.
Yeah.
Wow.
So like this movie really did divide a lot of critics in that regard, and I think that's one of the things that people wanted us to, or at least that person who left us a bad review, wanted us to try to go a little bit more in depth. And here's the thing. If people read this film as misogynistic, or they feel like, yeah, there is a white savior complex, and I'm uncomfortable with the racial dynamics, or I don't think it treats sexual assault in a realistic or appropriate manner, those are all acceptable readings. Like, we're not out here to necessarily change your mind. It's more just, I found that there was a weird, this is maybe going to get me in trouble. I found that there was a weird kind of glibness to some of these reviews where people were just really like, well, this was made by a man and it's kind of bullshit. And I was like, I fully appreciate that there's a long history of rape revenge films that have been made by men and they don't always do a good job. But they really wanted to erase Nicole Snyder from this as though it was Richard Shepard who made the whole thing himself. And I'm like, okay, well, that's incorrect. But also this idea that the movie has to be realistic. That's why I said it was a red flag to me, because I'm like, what about this movie screams realist to you? Like, Mae, you said early on, you were like, if this was a drama, we would be talking about it in a very different way. But we've described it as playful and exploitative. So why would we assume that this is going to do like a super realistic depiction of sexual assault?
To me, like, this film does operate in a heightened reality.
Oh, absolutely. There's so much heightened about it. Not just from the performances, but the whole world feels heightened. I wish that the way quote unquote discourse worked on the internet was not the way discourse works on the internet, because I would be very interested to have actual conversations with people who have differing opinions about stuff that I love.
Yeah.
You know, that's one of the things I do love about Halloweenies, is because there's so fucking many of those people. It's really fun when there's an episode where, you know, there's 4 of them and 1 or 2 of them has a totally different opinion of the thing that they're discussing. It makes it more interesting. And, you know, we're talking about differences of opinion in media and interpretation of media. We're not talking about, like, intense, important political ideology things.
Mm-hmm.
And those ideas can still filter into those kind of discussions. But like, I would love to talk to this person and understand what about this felt misogynistic to them. What about it felt, you know, because I do not see this film as being male gazy at all. I do not see it as misogynistic. And so having a discussion with that person to try to understand how and why they saw it that way, and maybe, you know, coming to some middle ground together would be really cool.
Yeah, I did see a lot of people claiming that this film has a kind of faux feminist angle to it. And I think that's the good for her element. Maybe not feeling earned, taking into consideration the lack of consent and that sort of thing. And I think that those are all valid points. But again, I think sometimes there's also a bit of a rush to have a kind of like
inflammatory response to any piece of art.
That, but also just even in the process of writing, like you're trying to get pull quotes, you're trying to get something that people can like grab a hold of, something that's going to like drive engagement. And sometimes it feels not like it hasn't been properly considered, but we're not really unpacking things to the depth that they maybe need to be. So instead we're just like, well, I'm just going to throw out misogynistic. Well, I'm just going to throw out homophobic. I'm just going to blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, but those are loaded terms. Like connotatively, there are implications to using particular words. You know, it's the way that people react to things like woke nowadays, where it's just like, oh, that term doesn't mean what it once did. And if you're going to put it into a review, you're immediately going to produce some kind of reaction in people.
Right, you're opening a can of worms.
But I'll just repeat, kind of paraphrase what I said earlier, where it's like, you know, this movie is escapist. And I think in 2019, in the wake of Me Too, like people didn't want to watch a movie about rape that was escapist.
Right.
Right.
I think what you're talking about, Joe, also factors into why I prefer watching things with other people. Because then I get to talk about it afterwards. You know, I love logging things on Letterboxd, whatever. It's a fun way to keep track of what I've done. It's a fun way to talk about media that I love. And I find that my most insightful reviews that I write on there happen after I've watched something with someone so that I can discuss it, so that I can glean some ideas from them, maybe pick up on things that I didn't notice, maybe change the way I thought about it. And then I go on there and I write my review and I read it back and I'm like, oh, this is really cool. You know, I'm glad that I had this discussion with someone. A lot of the time people are watching and reviewing things in a bubble. And there's no discussion, there's no dialogue. And I think when you're critiquing media that can have so many different interpretations, it's important to get more than just your own perspective before you put down words about it.
Well, it's amazing how getting other people's opinions can re-inform your opinion, since your opinion is based on your life experiences and their opinions are based on their life experiences, which are different from your life experiences.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It is tricky, though. I mean, I will fully acknowledge that a lot of these pieces were written in what was very clearly either a short turnaround from when the film came out or around the time that the film was having that kind of like popular discourse in the first couple of weeks of release. And it's like, well, that's not always driven by the person who's writing the piece. Sometimes that's
for
their
sure.
editors and all the like. I'm fully willing to acknowledge. I don't know. It felt like people came into this with a bit of like they had the pitchforks and the torches out and sort of ready to go. But I feel like I also need to be very clear. I like this movie and I do feel defensive about some of these critiques.
No, and I hope I'm not sounding accusatory toward any of those people. I know that like there are deadlines. When new movies are coming out, people who are paid to write about them have to do it as quickly as possible. So there's not always those opportunities for dialogue. And that's an unfortunate limitation.
It's a shame.
Yeah, it's a shame. It would be great to give people time to absorb something more than once and reflect on it. Take a little while before they review it.
Especially like meaty things or things like this movie where, oh, this is not what I was expecting. What is this movie doing?
Right.
If you don't get a chance to watch this film a second time and then you got to pump out that review.
Ooh, yeah.
It's tricky.
yeah, there's a lot of processing involved in this movie.
Well, and that's, I mean, like, again, like seeing this at a festival. I mean, granted, did I churn out my 5-star review for this film the next day? I absolutely did. But I also didn't have, like, have the issues with this film's depiction of sexual assault that these other critics did. And again, y'all are right. These are all valid opinions. And these people may still feel the same way today if they watched it again. Maybe they won't. I don't know.
Well,
but I'm glad, Joe, that we were able to bring in some alternative opinions, some dissenting opinions on this film because, yeah, just because.
All right, so why don't we move into Act 4, which is duets, basically where all the violence happens. So we start off by killing Paloma. She wanders into the living room, she pees herself, and then she dies.
So drunk, she didn't even know we stabbed her.
It's not drunk. She's been...
Drugged.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can we just talk about, we're going to chop your balls off and sell them as trinkets? I love that line. I love that visual. I love that threat to him as a man who has dedicated his life to abusing people and being like, you know, we're not going to cut your dick off. We're going to cut your balls off to emasculate you.
Literally, exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. And then we get this wig, which to me...
after we change from orchestral to R&B, and also the girls are now dressed in gray sweatpants.
I love it. I love this visual.
It's like, we put on our murder gear, we're here to fuck shit up.
The wig is such an interesting thing, though, right? Because why... I guess, like, is her shaved head meant to be, like, symbolic of, I guess, her trauma, and so she hides it the whole time, but then now this is her, like, being like, nope, this is the real me.
No, it's giving us timeline. It's showing us how long it's been since her attempt and when she was in the hospital and received ECT, which... I have a lot of feelings about ECT, which for people who don't know is electroconvulsive therapy. It was literally originally developed to shock the crazy and the gay out of people. And it was definitely used on people who actually have neurodivergencies. But it was used a lot on people who they saw as deviant.
Yeah.
You know, which is queer people and, like, anyone who was just outside of the mainstream.
Yeah, at all.
And so... I have a lot of mixed feelings about it. They have refined the technology. They have made it safer and more humane. There are still some weird fucking side effects. People have memory loss with it. And other people, it, like, literally cures their depression. And so, you know, I don't think the movie is making a statement on it. I don't think it has anything to say about it other than that for Allison, it is part of what woke her up and set her on this path to stop, you know, putting an end to what's happening there.
I didn't even put that together, but now that you say that, that actually does make sense.
Yeah, and it's showing us, like, it has not been that long since she was in the hospital, because her hair has not grown out that much. And also, have y'all ever seen that Bonjour Girl thing? It's the opening of Beauty and the Beast, you know, where Bella's singing this Provincial Life, but it's this guy who does his own vocals for it, and it's, hey girl, hey girl, hey girl, hey girl, hey girl.
Little town, it's a quiet village, every day like the one before. Little town full of queens and homos, waking up to say, hey girl, hey girl, hey girl, hey girl, hey girl.
And he's just making up these ridiculous lyrics. And at one point he's like, bonjour, Bernice, you know, like as if Bella's dishing with her friend, and mentions that, like, some character has a wig. And there's a part later where you see that, like, it was a wig, and this is actually in the animation, and the guy goes, I told you it was a wig!
That is a wig, bitch. I told you it was a wig!
And so, of course, that's what I thought during the wig
when you saw
reveal.
this.
Yeah, and I fucking lost it and started laughing so hard.
Like, I think you're both very right. I think this also feeds into the exploitation element because it's like a visual shorthand to be like, oh, she been crazy recently. And I'm using crazy specifically because it's like, she was in the loony bin, she was getting her head shaved and this kind of stuff. Like, very much the connotation of what we expect. My piece, May, was not that, but it was the Kimberly reveal on Melrose Place. See, and to be honest, having remembered what Eric Carmela was like, I wouldn't be surprised if that was at least one of the influences.
Oh, 100%. And also we're showing our age here, but yeah,
right.
you are correct.
Her taking the wig off, though, is just the wig wearer's version of taking your earrings off before you start fighting someone.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So they do, in fact, come in to fuck shit up, and it was a very deliberate choice to shoot it with this sort of shoulder-mounted camera.
Okay, I'm glad you said that, because I normally don't like this. I find this kind of thing visually unappealing. However, it really works in this scene, because we are just in Charlotte's face, experiencing this with her, and I think that adds to the catharsis of the scene.
Yeah, it also adds to the disorientation.
Oh, yeah?
You know, when she gets knocked to the ground, it's very disorienting for both her and us. And it helps us relate to her in that moment because we're just like, holy shit, holy shit, holy shit.
Yeah, I found an interview in Vulture where Williams says specifically about the kind of getting knocked out, coming back, and almost like gaps in the timeline. She says the goal was to watch someone who's leaving and then returning to her body multiple times. So it's like, obviously she's in this fight and she's been hit in the head and she's like, you know, phased, but it's also about this person who is trying to put on a performance in this place where she was sexually assaulted multiple times over the course of her life and trying to process the fact that she's there for vengeance, but also, holy shit, I'm triggered because this is where it all went down.
Yeah. I think it's very effective in that.
Yeah.
So when she does end up waking up, it's because Lizzie is encouraging her that she needs help because Anton is going for the knife, and she wakes up just in time to get this blade directly in her arm, and he just works his way down.
Yeah, this hurts.
Did y'all see Men?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, actually, 2 movies did that this year. Men did that, and Terrifier 2 did that.
There we go.
Oh, well, also technically Hellraiser. The new Hellraiser.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So
we love good arm trauma.
I will not be watching Terrifier. I can't do clowns. I actually have a fear of clowns.
Oh yeah, the clown's all over that movie, so you probably should not watch it.
Oh, yeah. No interest. I'm good. But yeah, no, that kind of injury where it's just like, it's such an exposed part of you, and it takes so long to implement is so uncomfortable. It's so uncomfortable. I had an easier time watching the fake bugs, you know, supposedly bursting out of Lizzie's skin and then her chopping her hand off. That's easier for me to take than a knife, like, going all the way through someone's arm.
It's so rough.
It's so rough.
So I do want to bring back the racial element just to make sure that I'm paying it off, because I think I remembered to reference it earlier. So it was very important to Shepard and Carmelo and Snyder that when they actually brought Logan Browning on board, because they did like colorblind casting, they weren't looking for like a black and white actress for these 2 roles. But when they got Logan Browning on, they realized the racial implications of who they had cast in which roles. So they very deliberately wanted to make sure that it was Lizzie who gets like the killing blow on, well, the killing blow, who inflicts most of the damage on Anton in the scene with the fire poker.
Okay.
Because they didn't want
a white savior.
Of white savior.
Yeah, there you go.
And that's responsible filmmaking.
So then we end with this final shot, which is the 2 women come together now in a duet. a different kind of duet than we saw them do earlier in the film, but they each use their one remaining arm to perform the perfection. We don't hear it because we don't need to, but we also see that they have, yes, boxing Helena / American married Anton.
This fucker is dismembered and his eyes and mouth sewn shut, so all this guy can do is listen.
Yeah, and I love that, and it's so poetic. It's so fucking poetic. It's so fucking cathartic. I love that they're essentially giving him what he wants.
He's the closest to God that he's ever been.
Right, but they're giving it to him on their own fucking terms.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying, fuck you, we are perfect, and you don't get to watch it. You get to hear it, and you get to be mutilated beyond recognition while you hear it, because that's what you fucking deserve.
So I do have another grenade that I'm going to throw into this. I'm back to Romano from Vox, and she writes, in its final shot, the film reveals that Lizzie and Charlotte have finally achieved the titular perfection, the ability to craft a flawless musical performance, entirely because of the suffering and violence they individually endured in their vengeance quest against their rapists. And I did see this in a couple of other articles, that some feminists took issue with this idea that these women are better off because of their sexual assault. Like, they become better people who are able to better achieve their goals, and in this case, achieve the perfection. And I don't feel comfortable critiquing that, because I feel like that probably is a valid critique, but it's definitely something that didn't occur to me when I saw the film.
I don't take issue with that as a concept of yeah, you can critique a film and say that's what it's doing. I just don't think that's what this film is doing.
I personally don't think that's what the film is doing. I did not read that from it. I can understand why someone would. Absolutely. I don't think that's what it's saying, though. I think what it's saying is, I don't think they achieved the perfection because of everything they went through. I think they achieved the perfection because they finally fucking rid themselves of the curse of this man looming over them.
I would also argue that the camaraderie between them is what allowed them to do this. Like, I mean, yes, did they happen to have to go through a lot of bad shit? Yes, but I don't think it's that shit that made them stronger. And also, if anything, they became stronger when they started working together.
Right. Yeah, and like, you could say they only started working together because of all of this bad stuff.
Right.
And that's not necessarily true. If Charlotte had stayed at the academy, they would have been playing music together anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
So we can kick it back to Shepard, because in that same Vulture interview that I referenced earlier, he does say, like, this was basically the reason he made this movie. It's because he envisioned this final shot and he was like, how do we get to that? Like,
man.
He was so excited by the idea. So he doesn't perceive this as a good thing. He doesn't endorse their behavior or condone it. He says they're feeding this man, they're cleaning him, but they've also tortured him and they're living their life. This is their life, and it's not a happy ending. It's not a sad ending, but it's a victory.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Because victory doesn't necessarily mean happy.
Right.
Exactly.
I like that.
Yeah, like they did get their vengeance, but I think we can safely say that neither of these two women are okay. Because, look at what they have done to this man to get their vengeance. I'm not walking away from this being like, well, they're great now. They're able to make great music together. It's like, oh, they're still deeply fucked up.
Oh,
yeah, they still have to live the rest of their lives.
Yeah. One of the things I do love about this ending, though, is that we don't hear it. We don't hear what they're playing. We are hearing a Chromatics cover of a whole song, which is a great fucking song, and like the lyrics are so perfect for it. And there's something so beautiful and so heartbreaking about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I really like what Shepard said about it, that like, this is not a good ending.
But I will also say that a common trait of rape revenge films is that, you know, typically, these films will roll credits as soon as the survivor murders the last of her assailants. Because, unfortunately, in reality, what will come next is she will be arrested and put in jail.
Right.
And so I actually do think that, again, perfection, we don't really get that side of it, but it's like, we kind of know what's going to happen after this scene, or at least we know like what their lives are in store for them. But I would say a rape prevention that handles that kind of issue very well is MFA.
Right. Yeah.
But again, it's a thing where it's
ending too.
It's a downer ending for the protagonist of the film that you're rooting for. But again, she's made a lot of really illegal choices throughout the film.
I have not seen that.
Oh, May, it's really good. Yeah.
Okay.
It's like Promising Young Woman, but if like the survivor was alive and taking her own revenge.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, I haven't seen Promising Young Woman because I know how it ends, and that pissed me off.
Then
which is fair.
I would give MFA a watch then, because literally when I finished Promising Young Woman, I was also angry, and I was like, MFA did this so much better.
All right, I will give that a shot.
And that one's actually also female directed.
Yes,
Nice.
It is.
Excellent.
But
yeah, that's the perfection.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't have any other words to say about this, but do you have any final thoughts on the perfection before we close out? And May, you have the guest of honor.
I think this movie is extremely challenging. I think it's extremely upsetting, and I think it's also extremely fun and extremely beautiful. And I am so glad y'all asked me to be a part of this episode. I love how responsible y'all are about having the right people on to talk about movies and making sure that people with applicable lived experiences get to add their perspectives. And so I'm really appreciative. I got to come on and talk about this and offer my perspective and really like dive deep into this. I love talking about movies and music and things that I love. And so being able to discuss this was just awesome, because it's a movie that has become very important to me.
And thank you for being candid and open, and honestly for being so vulnerable with us, because I just want to make it clear, people don't have to go to that level when they come on this show.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, no, that's me.
I think it enriches the episode. And so I want to thank you for bringing that to the table for this episode.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I was honestly, this was very cathartic for me, just like the movie.
Oh, good. I'm really glad to hear that, because if it had gone the other way, I would have felt a little guilty.
Oh God, what have we done?
I hate you, and I'm never listening to your podcast again.
Fair. That would be fair.
That would have been my main concern, honestly. Yeah. Joe, anything else from you?
No. You know what? I think that's a lovely place to leave it.
Love it. All right, everyone. Well, before we announce what we're covering next week, May, let everyone know, where can they find you and your work on social media?
So I am Everson Poe, EversonPoe, on Twitter and Instagram. You can find my music at eversonpoe.bandcamp.com. I have a ridiculous amount of music out there. I released my first album in 2009, and I have released so much in the last couple of years. Thanks, pandemic. And I don't know. I love making music. I love sharing it with people. And it's really nice because in the last few years, it's really found an audience.
Good. Well, if you would like to get in touch with us, you can reach us on Twitter and Instagram at HorrorQueers. Shoot us an email at horrorqueers@gmail.com. Find us on Letterboxd to keep track of all the films we've covered. Go to our YouTube channel to check out all of our videos of interviews and discussions and stuff. If you want to chat with other listeners, please join our Facebook group. And if you have a moment, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And, we always love reviews. And if you want to support us even more, you can support us by becoming a patron at patreon.com/horrorqueers. It's a new year, 2023, so welcome, everybody. I guess we had our new theme on this episode too, huh, Joe?
We did indeed, yes.
This month, if you go to subscribe to Patreon right now, we've got episodes on the horror... Well, not right now, but this month, we will have episodes on the horror anthology sequel, Scare Package 2, Rad Chad's Revenge, Netflix's Edgar Allan Poe murder mystery, The Pale Blue Eye, Skinamarink, the movie that had internet pirates showing their asses everywhere last month, And Megan, the film whose trailer took the world by storm last year. Oh, and we've also got an audio commentary on Cloverfield in honor of its 15th anniversary. But before we close out, Joe, what are we covering next week for some much lighter material?
No, that's Trey showing his ass that he has not seen next week's movie.
I know, it was a joke.
Okay, well, we're working on sarcasm this year, apparently.
Yes, and.
Oh, God.
So we're going to travel back to the mid-90s, but we're going to talk about a very particularly 80s phenomenon, because we're going to talk about a very underseen film, 1995's Safe by Todd Haynes. And we're going to get AIDS crisis-y.
And starring Julianne Moore. You really buried the lead there.
Yes, it stars a very early Julianne Moore. It's a great film. It's an interesting film. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, this was referenced heavily in a lot of my film school classes, but they never screened it. And so I've known about this movie for a long time. I've just never gotten a chance to watch it. So I'm really happy to get the chance to do that next week.
Well, there you go. I'm going to rectify that.
Yep. Fun, lighthearted AIDS conversations. So until next week, we can cross out the perfection.
Indeed. And cross out horror queers for the first time in 2023.
Little town, it's a quiet village. Every day, like the one before. Little town full of queens and homos, waking up to say, hey girl, hey girl, hey girl, hey girl, hey girl.
Atlas Avenue, a long stretch of road that encompasses everything the city of Kennett Heights has to offer. Neon lights, traffic, crime, the hustle and bustle of everyday life, and the craziest of characters. My office was above it all. My name is James Locke, and I'm a PI.
Hello, Mr. J. How the hell you doing today?
Good, Edith. Nearly every year I have a new case. New people to meet, new clues to discover, and new problems to solve. But I do it the old-fashioned way. No technology. Nothing post-1950. Hell, I don't even listen to podcasts, but you should. Atlas Avenue Beat is a spoof of the film noir genre with goofy characters, tons of wordplay, and non-stop raunchy humor. There's also 3 whole seasons out right now with more on the way. Just search for Atlas Avenue Beat wherever you listen to podcasts or visit us online at bloody.fm.